see your tire pressure messages, and we did not copy your last.
Roger.
The final moments before a national tragedy. Heading home, Shuttle Columbia breaks up in midair.
At 9 o'clock this morning, Mission Control in Houston lost contact with our Space Shuttle Columbia. A short time later, debris was seen falling from the skies above Texas. The Columbia is lost. There are no survivors.
7 crew members lost. NASA officials begin a daunting investigation.
My promise to the crew and to the crew families is that the investigation that we have just launched will find the cause, we'll fix it, and then we'll move on.
Tonight, a CNN special report. Columbia, a shuttle tragedy. From the CNN Center in Atlanta, here's Miles O'Brien.
Good evening. In the 42 years of U.S. human spaceflight, there had never been a fatal accident during the descent to Earth or in landing. But this morning, that all changed. 16 minutes before it was scheduled to touch down in Florida at the Kennedy Space Center, the Space Shuttle Columbia fell apart in the skies over Texas. You're looking at some animation developed through the good graces of analytical graphics, and what you see is the general scenario that occurs on re-entry as a space shuttle returns from space, traveling at some 17,500 miles an hour, breaking its way toward the runway at the Kennedy Space Center in the Florida Peninsula, pitching nose high up, presenting to the strongest portion of the heat those black tiles there to insulate the space shuttle, which is, after all, an aluminum frame aircraft, from the 3,000-degree heat of re-entry. It was at the absolute apex of that heat, Mach 18, 200,000 feet and change, when the Space Shuttle Columbia disintegrated high over Texas. This scenario is being watched very closely in Houston right now. There is a mission evaluation team right now poring over data, which was captured immediately after it became apparent that there was a catastrophic failure of the Space Shuttle Columbia. I'm told that mission managers will be looking very closely, and the engineers will be looking closely at what happened to the elevons. These are the flaps in the rear portion of the Space Shuttle Columbia. There is some indication, based on the preliminary look at the data, that there was some unusual movement by these elevons, perhaps something that might have caused an abrupt maneuver very early in this investigation, but that is one of the things being looked at as they burn the midnight oil in Houston in the mission evaluation room. In the morning, there will be a series of meetings, 8 a.m. local time, 9 a.m., 10 a.m., series of management meetings and engineering meetings to look at the data preliminarily, get a sense of where they're headed, and then in the noon hour Central Time, they will report back to reporters with another briefing to give us a better sense of where they're headed with this investigation, still obviously in the very early hours. Coming up in the next hour of this program, extensive coverage of the Columbia tragedy and what might have gone wrong. Also anchoring tonight's coverage, Wolf Blitzer live at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Lou Dobbs from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, and following the Bush administration's reaction, Judy Woodruff in Washington. First, let's quickly update you on the very latest. All future space shuttle flights are now on hold until NASA gets a better grip on what went so terribly wrong this morning, as you see in these pictures, breaking up south of Dallas. Space Agency officials say not to worry, though, about crew members still aboard the International Space Station. They have enough supplies to last until June. FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, has been put in charge of recovering and collecting the debris over a tremendously wide swath of the continental United States. The military has been called in to help that search. They're concentrating on eastern Texas. Bits and pieces of the shuttle have also been found in parts of Louisiana. And experts say that because Columbia broke up at 200,000 feet, the debris field could extend to even into Arkansas, Arizona, and New Mexico. Outside NASA headquarters and at the White House, flags flying at half-staff, a tribute to the 7 astronauts on board the Space Shuttle Columbia. Many of the crew's relatives were at the Kennedy Space Center excitedly waiting the touchdown, a touchdown which never came after a 16-day science mission which by all accounts was nearly flawless. This was the 28th mission for the Space Shuttle Columbia, focused on science as we told you, and Israel's first astronaut in space.
3, 2, 1,
We have booster ignition and liftoff of Space Shuttle Columbia with a multitude of national and international space research experiments.
10:39 a.m., January 16th. Columbia takes
Houston
off.
now controlling the flight of Columbia, the international research mission finally underway. Commander Rick Husband joined on the flight deck by pilot Willie McCool, flight engineer Colton Chavla, and mission specialist Dave Brown. Mission specialist Laurel Clark, payload commander Mike Anderson, and payload specialist Ilan Ramon seated down on the middeck.
10:41 a.m. About 80 seconds into the flight, a piece of debris on the external fuel tank comes off, hitting the underside of the orbiter left wing. There is some concern about overheating during re-entry if enough tiles are knocked loose. But after studying the images frame by frame, NASA engineers decide to continue the mission. 3:10 p.m., January 25th, 1 week into the mission. The crew gives CNN an update from space.
We had a great ride to orbit, and all the activation of the experiments in the space hab went extremely well. And we're really, we've got our space legs and up and running.
Another week passes. Saturday morning, February 1st. The crew is just hours from returning home.
Good morning, Houston. We're getting ready for a big day up here. Had a great time on orbit and really excited to come back home.
8:15 a.m. While still in orbit, Columbia fires its braking rockets. Its touchdown sequence is underway. It begins re-entry. 8:59 a.m. Mission Control hears from Columbia for the last time.
And Columbia, Houston, we see your tire pressure messages, and we did not copy your last.
Roger.
9 a.m., just 16 minutes away from its scheduled touchdown on Florida's East Coast, Mission Control in Houston loses all data and voice contact with Columbia. The shuttle is seen in the skies above Dallas, Texas. At this point, the spacecraft is roughly 203,000 feet above the Earth, traveling about 12,500 miles an hour. Residents across Texas, Arkansas, and Louisiana see what NASA is not yet talking about.
We were woken up by this rumble. Today we were trying to sleep in on Saturday, and we heard this, sounded like a train going through our property.
The dogs started barking and then got shook the earth.
And we've seen large masses of pieces coming off of the shuttle.
I'm devastated, devastated. It's unbelievable.
And the National Weather Service even picks up these images on radar.
That is the wreckage of the shuttle Columbia coming through.
9:20. Quiet disbelief in the control room in Houston and from onlookers at the Kennedy Space Center.
We're shocked. We at a loss for words. We don't know what to think. We feel so sad and sorry for the families of people that have been lost. Just hope they're with God.
9:29 a.m. NASA declares an emergency. Calls reporting debris hitting the ground flood police, NASA, and newsroom phones. 9:44 a.m. NASA warns residents to stay away from the debris, which could be dangerous because of toxins in the propellants used. 11 a.m. A flag at the Kennedy Space Center next to the countdown clock is lowered to half staff. 1:30 p.m. NASA Administrator Sean O'Keefe.
We trust that the prayers of the nation will be with them and with their families. And again, a more courageous group of people you could not have hoped to know than the families of these crew members. And an extraordinary, extraordinary group of astronauts who gave their lives.
2:05. The President addresses the nation, delivering the gravest news.
This day has brought terrible news and great sadness to our country. The Columbia is lost. There are no survivors.
At Mission Control in Houston, the first indication of trouble this morning was the loss of temperature sensors on Columbia's left wing, almost as if the plug had been pulled. This was followed within seconds by a series of other problems. Wolf Blitzer joining us live now from the Johnson Space Center in Houston. Wolf,
Miles, as you well know, this is a small family, all the people involved in this mission control operation here, and there's tremendous sadness, especially severe sadness here because the 7 astronauts had trained here in Houston at the Johnson Space Center. Their families, by and large, were here. They had spent a long time getting ready for this mission, and everyone here is, as they've said to me, the words can't describe how upset, how sad they are at what's going on, and spontaneous memorial services are erupting even outside the gates of the Johnson Space Center here in Houston, Texas. Now, they are urging the public to try to help if they can. They know there are hundreds, perhaps thousands of pieces of debris out there. They know that the public saw the images of the debris landing in central Texas, northern Texas, all over here, all the way over to Louisiana. They are asking, anyone has any film, any video, there's 2 ways of getting in touch with NASA officials. You can either call them at a number we've been putting up on the screen, 281-483-3388. I'll repeat that, 281-483-3388. Or you can email them if you believe you have some information that could help the investigators. Their email address is ColumbiaImages@nasa.gov. Columbia Images, all one word, @nasa.gov. Now, Ed Lavandera has been out there in Texas. He's been talking to people who've seen some of the debris. Ed Lavandera is joining us now live from Nacogdoches. Ed, tell us what you've seen and what you've heard.
Well, Wolf, what we've seen throughout the day is many people, actually closer to the Dallas-Fort Worth area, many people were paying attention to this shuttle landing today. Just kind of the course of events today, kind of everything lined up nicely. It was a beautiful day here, weather-wise, in Texas, and many people were able to see one of those great moments where you could see the space shuttle streaking across the state of Texas as it was headed toward Florida for its final approach. And so a lot of people watching the live coverage on the local newscast that as the shuttle was streaking overhead here. So that was a very strange moment, a very unique moment, I should say, not a chance a lot of people get to see. So we're about 3.5 hours southeast of the Dallas-Fort Worth area and about another 3 hours north of Houston to kind of pinpoint you. And we're in the center of Nacogdoches, Texas. And this has kind of become a nerve center, if you will, for a lot of people who have come here. And the reason they're here is this one parking lot is there's just a 3 by 3 foot piece of debris there. And this is very significant of what we've seen throughout the East Texas area. In people's backyards, driveways, sidewalks, the back roads of East Texas have seen small parts of debris like this scattered all over the place. And we've seen the area is cordoned off just like this, and many times we've often seen private landowners there doing the same, waiting for authorities to come by and pick up this material. We understand that they're trying to line up the process by how exactly they're going to do this. I've also had a chance to speak with other people who say that they have seen debris in the back of their businesses or in their homes as well, and that I guess there's just so many calls that have been coming into the authorities here in the East Texas area that has been impossible to get somebody out to all of these locations at this point so far. So there's a lot of work still left to do here, Wolf.
And do people understand, by and large, how dangerous it is, these toxic propellants, as they call it, that if anybody gets too close or touches the kind of debris, they could be in trouble? By and large, has that message gotten through?
You know, for the most part, I have seen that you'll be driving around a neighborhood and you'll see a piece of debris on the ground, and what you'll see is a lot of people gathered around, but they'll keep a safe distance from it, not touching it. A lot of people taking pictures of it, but for the most part, I think that word has gotten out that people should stay away.
And it is, of course, the property of the United States government. It would be a crime for anyone to take any of that debris with them. CNN's Ed Lavandera is joining us from Nacogdoches in Texas. Thanks very much, Ed. And Miles, when I throw it back to you, as you well know, the investigators want to collect as much of that debris as possible. It's unclear whether they're going to try to recreate as best they can the Columbia, but they do want that debris because there could be some telltale signs what exactly caused this horrible explosion. Miles?
Well, Wolf, as you well know, it's not an overstatement to say that this thing could be unlocked, the puzzle could be solved by simply one piece. So we encourage people, if they see pieces, to let NASA know. Who knows what the significance of that piece might be. We're going to take a short break, and when we return, we're going to go to Washington, check in with Judy Woodruff, and talk about the president and the political implications of all this as NASA embarks on efforts to fly one day again. And we'll also check in with Lou Dobbs, who is at the Kennedy Space Center, where Columbia left 16 days ago in a blaze of glory. Stay with us. We all knew it would happen. We just didn't know how. That's the words of one NASA worker from Houston today as they consider what happened as the Space Shuttle Columbia came in on what seemed like the flawless conclusion to a nearly flawless mission. Let's continue our coverage as we turn our attention now to Washington and to Florida on a story that really spans the entire country. Lou Dobbs at the Kennedy Space Center, but first Judy Woodruff in Washington. Judy?
That's right. Thank you, Miles. And it has been a full day and a very difficult day for President George W. Bush, who, as we know, until just lately, his main focus has been pressing the U.S. case against Iraq. Well, today, the president has talked by telephone with the families of the lost astronauts. He has spoken words of consolation to the rest of the country, to all of us. CNN's White House correspondent Suzanne Malveaux has been at the White House all this day following developments. Suzanne.
Well, Judy, tonight, leaders around the world are offering their condolences to the White House as President Bush marks this tragic day with reflection, mourning, and prayer.
In honor of those lost, the flag at the White House lowered at half down. President Bush once again charged with carrying out the somber
testing,
duty
1, 2, 3, 4,
of bringing
5.
the nation together in time of tragedy.
My fellow
Testing,
Americans,
you want it up higher?
this day has brought terrible news and great sadness to our country.
Testing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
At 9 o'clock this morning, Mission Control in Houston lost contact with our Space Shuttle Columbia. A short time later, debris was seen falling from the skies above Texas. The Columbia is lost. There are no survivors.
6 Americans and 1 Israeli lost, people the president said assumed great risk in the service to all humanity.
The cause in which they died will continue. Mankind is led into the darkness beyond our world by the inspiration of discovery and the longing to understand. Our journey into space will go on.
Just after 9 o'clock this morning at Camp David, President Bush is notified by his chief of staff that NASA has lost contact with the shuttle. At 10:30, he's briefed by NASA's director and decides to return to the White House early. The Situation Room at the White House goes into full gear, notifying all the principals. By 12:30, the president is back in the Oval Office when NASA's director tells him there are no survivors. 15 minutes later, Mr. Bush, standing at his desk, holds a conference call with the victims' families who are gathered around a speakerphone at the Kennedy Space Center. He tells them, "We express our love and appreciation for all those who died today. I want the loved ones to know there are millions of Americans praying for you, including me and Laura. It's an incredibly tough day for you. May God bless you all. I wish I was there to hug, cry, and comfort you right now." In a poignant moment, a White House aide who was with the president says after the call, a somber Mr. Bush briefly excused himself to the executive residence. The president also called Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon to offer his condolences for the Israeli astronaut lost. And the president received calls from world leaders from Mexico, Canada, and even those recently at odds with the president over his stand with Iraq, France, and Russia.
And Judy, today was a big day for the Department of Homeland Security. Its new Secretary Governor Tom Ridge able to quickly assess and gather information, assign FEMA the lead role in recovery, and also to reassure the American people that as tragic as this disaster was, it was not the result of terrorism. Judy.
All right, thank you, Suzanne. At the same time, they are saying they are pressing ahead with the case against Iraq. That will continue. Well, as you've been hearing from my colleague Miles O'Brien, NASA's engineers are already hard at work trying to solve the mystery of what happened to the shuttle Columbia. But a number of other federal agencies are also involved in the investigation. And for that part of the story, we're going to bring in our Patty Davis. Patty.
Well, Judy, FEMA is heading the response and recovery effort. Other agencies are heading south to take part in the investigation. The debris strewn across several states is crucial to finding what caused the accident.
We're going to gather every piece we can find, treat this much like an aircraft incident, and see if we can solve the puzzle.
Finding the pieces is a massive undertaking, but an essential one. If the cause is structural, debris could provide the key clues.
They can then piece that together to figure out how it came apart, and then that'll help them figure out where the cause was.
That's why officials are appealing to the public to turn over any pictures people took of the shuttle falling and to turn in any pieces found.
If you find debris, please call local authorities immediately to tell them of the location.
The Federal Emergency Management Agency is coordinating the federal government's response and recovery. The military guarding and searching for debris using planes, boats, and helicopters. The FAA instituting a 40-mile wide, 160-mile long restricted zone below 3,000 feet from Texas to Louisiana to protect aircraft involved in the recovery. The National Transportation Safety Board sending vehicle structure and system experts to help. NTSB crash investigators helped piece together debris from the in-flight breakup of the TWA 800 crash. This debris field as much as 100 times bigger.
This is going to be an extraordinarily challenging investigation. The vehicle was at 200,000 feet. It was traveling at 12,500 miles per hour. There simply has never been a breakup like this in aviation or space history.
In addition to debris, NASA says the shuttle had data and voice recorders, but more importantly, it was constantly streaming information to mission control.
We are preserving hardware around the country in our different facilities. We are impounding data here that represented the last data that we received from the crew, and we will be poring over that data 24 hours a day.
Besides NASA's own investigation, an independent group, including the military, the FAA, will also look into what happened, an investigation that could take months, if not years. Judy?
All right, Patty Davis, thanks very much. When you think about it, Miles, it seems almost a miracle that any pieces survived from that altitude and at that speed.
Judy, what I've seen is there aren't many very big pieces, that is for sure. Just 12 hours ago, hundreds of people were gathering at the Kennedy Space Center to see the shuttle landing. Their excitement quickly turned to shock. CNN's Lou Dobbs is at Kennedy. Lou?
Miles, as you say, shock, and the shock is still being felt profoundly here by everyone who works at NASA and who works with NASA. The NASA administrator, Sean O'Keefe, has spent much of the day comforting the families of the 7 astronauts who lost their lives today aboard Columbia. He has also spent much of his time learning as much as possible about what the NASA engineers, managers, and investigators know to this point. And he has been briefing congressional leaders, and amongst them House Majority Leader Tom DeLay and Congressman Dave Weldon. And I want to turn now, if I may, to John Zarella, my colleague here, who's covered the space program for some time. This represents something of a departure, does it not? Sean O'Keefe has really opened up the process and is sharing information, which has not always been the first reflex of this agency.
Right, exactly, and certainly back in 1986, that really was not the case back in 1986. It was far more of a closed family here, and they kept the information very close to the vest for quite some time, but an open process here, certainly.
John, I've just been told that our colleague Gary Tuckman is available. Gary, let's go to you quickly.
Works for NASA, and that's why it's what's happened today. We come to you from the Sunrise Diner in Cocoa Beach, just south of the Cape, where people are obviously talking about what happened today. Right here we have Mike and Joanna. Mike, you were telling me that Joanna, who's your friend, called you to tell you about the shuttle explosion. What did you think when you first heard that?
At first I didn't believe it, you know, shock and amazement. And then when I seen it was true, you think about the families and all that. And very sad thing.
You tell me when you live here, you just take for granted that the missions will all go okay.
Yeah, I mean, when I first moved down here, it was all we had to watch everyone come in, and then you just take for granted that they'll get here safely, and this time they didn't.
Thanks for talking with us. We want to go over here. This is Frank and Marilyn. Frank and Marilyn live in New York State half the year, and they live here half the year. And Marilyn was telling me that regularly they go out on their balcony on the ocean here when the shuttle takes off and when it lands, right?
That's right. It's very exciting, and being away from this area, I don't take it for granted. I think it's so exciting to watch the shuttles and the rockets go up, and we're on our balcony every single time.
Including this morning, right?
Including this morning.
Tell me what happened this morning.
We were there at 9 o'clock, and I was looking out, looking at the people on the beach, and waiting for the sound of that beautiful. I'm just really sad about this whole thing. But my heart goes out to all of the people involved, the families especially, their children, and Israel. I feel very sadly because they have a hero in India and especially the United States. I'm so sad for all of them. I think they're all heroes.
Frank and Marilyn, thank you very much for talking with me. It's obviously very emotional for the nation, for the world, but particularly for the people here in the Space Coast of Florida. Lou, back to you.
Gary, thank you very much. Gary Tuckman in Cocoa Beach, Florida. Now back to you, Miles.
All right, thank you very much, Lou. A check of the latest developments in today's shuttle tragedy is just ahead. And the question burning on so many minds tonight, what went wrong up there? We'll have a closer look at what we know at this time, obviously very early, and where authorities are focusing their attention as they work through the night tonight, Mission Control Houston. Plus, one of the crew members, Israel's first astronaut. We'll have a live report from Jerusalem for a man who was a national hero in that country. And later, in their own words, family members who were expecting their loved ones to return home to Earth this morning, their thoughts and their feelings on this terribly tragic day. Welcome back. Investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board, NASA, the military, and other federal agencies are trying to determine why the Space Shuttle Columbia broke apart this morning in the sky over Texas. All 7 astronauts aboard were lost. Columbia was at an altitude of some 39 miles, traveling 12,500 miles an hour, when it broke into fiery pieces. It was absolutely the hottest point of re-entry, 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Parts of the shuttle have been found in East Texas and Louisiana. Some pieces were so hot that they caused fires, as you see here. The spacecraft was so high the debris field may extend into New Mexico and Arizona. Parts of what authorities suspect are human remains also have been found. Now, as for the cause, several minutes before the breakup, there were some sensors on Columbia's left wing. They began failing, temperature sensors specifically, toward the rear portion of the wing. Others registered high temperatures, and there are reports that there were some unusual movements of the flaps at the back called elevons. Memories have gone back to launch day, when cameras saw a piece of foam insulation from the fuel tank breaking off, hitting Columbia's left wing. The shuttle program manager, Ron Dittemore, says at this point, not a smoking gun, but he adds, we cannot discount that there may be a connection. And we should tell you the person who will be heading this investigation. NASA has named a retired admiral who also headed the investigation into the explosion on board the USS Cole in Yemen to lead the investigation. His name is Admiral Harold Hal Gemin, and he will lead this independent investigation into determining the cause of the disintegration of the Space Shuttle Columbia. We will keep you posted on that. A team of experts from the National Transportation Safety Board is heading for Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. That's where NASA has set up a command post. The NTSB will help the space agency in what is expected to be a lengthy and difficult investigation of this morning's disaster.
First things first, NASA starts eliminating possible causes.
We have no indication that the mishap was caused by anything or anyone on the ground.
From there, the potential causes are innumerable, given the 1 million parts and complex operations that go into any shuttle mission. As rocket scientists like to say, it's always what you do not expect, because if you'd thought of it, you'd have fixed it. One of the Space Shuttle program's greatest achievements was the development of the insulating tiles that protect the shuttle on re-entry. There are more than 20,000 of them on each shuttle. Made of silica fiber, they are cool to the touch just seconds after being exposed to a 2,200-degree kiln. While they have been a great achievement, they have been a continuing problem for shuttle managers. They are brittle and can easily be knocked off during launch. The shuttle can land if some insulating tiles are damaged or break off, as seen here on the Space Shuttle Discovery. But if too many tiles are gone, the shuttle would get too hot.
The heat could actually cause the structure of the orbiter to break.
During Columbia's launch, a piece of insulation from the external fuel tank broke off and perhaps damaged some ceramic tiles. But shuttle managers determined it was safe for the mission to continue.
We can't discount that there might be a connection, but we have to caution you and ourselves that we can't rush to judgment on it.
Another likely point of focus for investigators, the attitude of the shuttle on re-entry. If the nose goes too high or too low, the shuttle could tumble and break up.
The belly of the shuttle is well protected, but if you get in the wrong orientation at any moment during that re-entry, you are not protected on all sides. And so, once you start coming apart, there's nothing you can do.
Columbia was the oldest shuttle. Just last year, engineers found stress and age cracks in shuttle engine parts. While those problems, experts say, are not likely to be the cause of this disaster, there could be some other unforeseen age-related problem with the shuttle. Whatever the cause, there may be clues in the data transmitted from the shuttle before communication was lost.
We will be poring over that data 24 hours a day for the foreseeable future.
NASA has undertaken major investigations several times before, the last after the Challenger disaster. Randy Avera worked on that investigation into why the Challenger disintegrated over the ocean shortly after liftoff.
What we do not have, as far as we know today, on the Columbia crash today, is close-up telescopic photos and videos of the actual effects that were taking place on the orbiter.
The first job, finding all the pieces that can be found, looking for clues in the fields, forests, and backyards of eastern Texas and western Louisiana. Not many people have experience investigating this kind of catastrophe, to say the least. Two of our guests this evening do, however. They both investigated the Challenger accident 17 years ago. With me here in Atlanta, Randy Avera, a former NASA engineer, and joining us from Boston, Eugene Covert, an engineer and educator who served on the Presidential Commission on the Challenger accident. Randy, I'd like to begin with you. Let's talk first of all about this debris. Comparing this huge swath of land where debris has been rained down, compare that to the challenge of trying to lift debris off the ocean floor. Which is a greater challenge for the team?
Well, both had their own unique challenges, but the large area of landmass today is certainly a different challenge from that of 1986, when the many elements of the Coast Guard, Navy SEALs, and U.S. Navy were diving down in about 100 feet or so of the Atlantic Ocean water to retrieve the evidence from the floor of the ocean, as well as collecting it off the surface of the ocean headed northbound in the Gulf Stream currents. There are many more people that are able at this point today to find components that are lying on the ground. So it will be something we look back at comparing the two to see which collected the evidence most efficiently.
All right, Eugene Covert, would you concur with that? I mean, one of the concerns, of course, is that people will take souvenirs, and that souvenir might very well be the smoking gun.
Well, by and large, I would agree. However, I believe that with the activity on the surface of the bottom of the ocean, it's possible that the dredges and so forth would cover up bits and pieces that might turn out to be important. I think that the possibility of finding something useful is possibly higher because it's over land, because there's so many people involved. Of course, one of the problems may be that somebody's trying to sneak a souvenir away. I understand that's a federal offense, and probably you don't want to mess with the feds to do it.
Not only that, very hazardous.
Randy, I want to call your attention to something I just found out. I was working the phones here when I had a little break, and if you look at these two flaps, these are movable surfaces on the trailing edge of the wing. They're called elevons. It controls the pitch, the up-down motion of the nose relative to its forward motion. I'm told that prior to those problems with the heat sensors, left wing, this area here, there was some unusual elevon movements that they're looking at right now as we speak, poring over the data. What would that tell you?
Well, it could tell us one of a couple of things. It could be that elevon movement was due to commands that were being sent to the elevons from the onboard general purpose computers. If the inertial measurement system of the orbiter, which monitors the attitude of the orbiter and roll, pitch, and yaw rates, if it was issuing a command or a series of commands to drive those elevons into dynamic positions, that would just be a response from a command. On the other hand, if the hydraulic actuators which drive the elevons, there are 4 elevons, 2 on each wing, and each elevon has a large hydraulic actuator. If those actuators had any malfunctions or failures within the hydraulic actuator, that could also be an issue. But NASA will be separating these into various categories, looking at the data, looking at the flight data, and reviewing the design, and also service history, repairs, or anything that may have been done to those elevon actuators, or the actual rigging of the what are called flipper doors. These are metal and composite material panels that are above what we call the wing cove area.
All right, I want to get one more point in from Eugene Covert. I'm sorry, Randy, to cut you off, but we are running short on time. Mr. Covert, is there anything that you've seen in all of these briefings that catches your attention more than something else?
Well, I have to be frank about this. One of the worst things you can do is speculate at a time like this. It seems to me that there are enough opportunities to make a mistake and put your feet in your mouth. Nature provides you the opportunity now not to speculate and not to wait, but to wait rather until some
all right, but let me ask you this. Short of speculating, do you feel fairly confident NASA will come up with the root cause of this?
I certainly, based on my previous experience, I think that the odds are very high that they will come up with the root cause. I think it's important to point out that the reason you have a serious accident investigation of this kind is to find out what went wrong, take those steps to reduce the likelihood of having such an accident again. I think that requires patience on the part of everybody. I can understand why people are impatient, but nevertheless, I think that patience is required to give the investigators the chance to look at stuff coldly and look at the facts dispassionately and follow the clues to wherever they lead you.
Eugene Covert, Randy Avera, thank you very much for navigating what are very complex waters for the layperson. We appreciate it. One of the reasons we explore space is to push the boundaries of science, and for the Shuttle Columbia 16 days in space, it had been entirely devoted to scientific experiments. Not an exaggeration to say that years of preparation go into the experiments that are selected to fly on space shuttles. The Columbia carried experiments on changes in flame, how flames spread in space, and how flowers change their scent in the absence of gravity. They also studied the effects of weightlessness on rats to learn more about how weightlessness affects humans long term. They measured atmospheric dust to see what dust has to do with global warming. That was the principal experiment of Ilan Ramon, the Israeli astronaut. There were bee, ant, and spider behavior tests in weightlessness, crystal growth, with the hope of finding potential drugs which could cure things like cancer even. Tumor development in space was studied, colon cancer specifically. And there was a study on the evolution of life in the universe that had as its two principal investigators an Israeli and a Palestinian. Now, along with the crew and Shuttle Columbia itself, the knowledge gained on all these experiments vanished today in the skies over Texas. Send it now to, we're going to take a break. We'll be back with more in just a moment.
astronauts flying at half-staff over the executive office building right next door to the White House. Earlier today, President Bush remembered Columbia's last crew of 7 for their courage, he said, their daring, and their idealism. For 4 of them, this was their first trip into space. 2 were colonels, both with the Air Force, one American, the other Israeli. Ilan Ramon was his country's first astronaut. He joined NASA as a payload specialist in 1997. Married with 4 children, Ramon was 48 years old. The commander of this mission was Rick Husband. He had been an astronaut since 1994 and piloted the Shuttle Discovery just about 4 years ago. Husband leaves behind a wife and 2 children. Laurel Clark was one of 2 doctors on this, her first flight, a mission specialist. She was the mother of 1. William McCool was Columbia's pilot. Age 41 and married, he too was flying his first mission in space. David Brown was the other surgeon on board the shuttle, a former college gymnast, a mission specialist for the flight. He was 46 years old. The payload commander was Michael Anderson. He flew aboard the shuttle Endeavour in 1998. That took him to the Mir space station. Anderson was married and 46 years old. Kalpana Chawla was a native of India. She became an astronaut in 1994. She operated the shuttle's robotic arm on a mission 3 years later. As we remember these astronauts, some of their relatives have chosen to share their grief and their apprehensions with the public. The parents of astronaut David Brown told CNN that they hope the nation's space exploration will go forward. But they said they're also afraid that today's loss was so catastrophic, nothing would be found of the shuttle or of their son.
There's nothing left to study. We saw the debris come down in the newsreel, photographs, and I'd like to have something of Dave to bury. That may not happen.
So hard. The sister of astronaut Michael Anderson was still in shock when she talked with reporters.
It hasn't set in yet, and it probably won't till I hear something very definite. Right now, I'm not listening to the TV because what they said was nothing that I guess I want to believe, because there's nothing that I feel is truly definite yet. So I'm not even listening.
I see. What are your plans? Are you planning to go to Dallas anytime soon?
To Houston, I'll go to Houston when I think it's appropriate. I'll go to Houston to be with my sister-in-law, and if necessary, I will be going to Spokane, Washington.
Her brother, astronaut Michael Anderson, grew up in the Spokane area. He flew to Russia's Mir space station in 1998. He was in charge of the Columbia's science experiments. Well, as we've noted, there is an international dimension to today's tragedy. Ilan Ramon, the first Israeli astronaut to fly in space, was on board the shuttle Columbia. His presence was a source of enormous pride for Israelis, and now is the cause of tremendous grief. CNN's Kelly Wallace joins us from Jerusalem. Kelly.
Judy, the first Israeli to travel in space, gave this country something to cheer about and celebrate after months and months of violence. But now Israelis are engaged in what has become an all too familiar ritual here, mourning. This time the loss of a national hero. Colonel Ramon had a distinguished military career. He fought for Israel in 2 wars. He also took part in the successful bombing of a nuclear reactor being built in Iraq in 1981. His extended family, his father and his brother, are now making their way to the United States to be reunited with Colonel Ramon's wife and his 4 children. Before leaving, Ramon's brother spoke out about the emails he had been receiving. He said Ramon looked at this shuttle mission as his proudest accomplishment.
There was euphoria and great joy, because it was the realization of Ilan's greatest dream. He was overjoyed. He corresponded from the shuttle. He wrote that he felt he was above the clouds in every sense.
And condolences coming in from throughout the world, including the Palestinian community. Yasser Arafat expressing his condolences to the American people and also to the Israeli people for their loss tonight. Judy.
Thanks, Kelly. A tragedy that brings us all together. Well, one of the Columbia astronauts who died this morning was Dr. Laurel Blair Salton Clark. She was a mission specialist. Clark was a U.S. Navy commander and a medical doctor. She considers Racine, Wisconsin, her hometown. And our Cece Rogers is there. Cece.
Hi, Judy. We're in front of Laurel Clark's high school, where people have been gathering all evening to pay respects to a fallen hero. On the last day of Shuttle Columbia's 2-week mission, it was Laurel Clark who took Houston's wake-up call.
Well, good morning, Houston. We're getting ready for a big day up here. Had a great time on orbit and really excited to come back home.
That the 41-year-old wife and mother would not make it home is still sinking in her hometown of Racine, Wisconsin. A makeshift memorial sits outside Horlick High School, where Laurel Salton, as she was known then, is something of a hero.
But she did what she wanted to accomplish. We all followed the flight and what she was doing up there, and to have something like that end in this kind of a tragedy, it's just almost beyond words to describe.
Students heard the news at a wrestling match and paused for a moment of silence and to sing the national anthem.
She was a great role model to us because it's pretty cool how someone from our school could go up in space. It's just awesome.
In nearby Milwaukee, Clark's brother said family members take comfort in the fact that she at least fulfilled a lifelong dream to travel in space.
She was a person who was very goal-oriented, and that's where she got where she was, but she was so warm and friendly with people. She loved kids. We all are very concerned about her son Ian and how he'll pull through this.
Family members also take comfort in her many accomplishments. She had degrees in zoology and medicine from the University of Wisconsin at Madison and worked as a Navy submarine doctor, at one point stationed in Scotland before going to the space program.
Hearing that song reminds me of all the different places down on Earth and all the friends and family that I have all over the world. Thanks, and it's been great working with you and all the other folks.
Her home in Wisconsin was never far from Laurel Clark's thoughts. She took a pennant from her high school up with her in the shuttle, and she was planning to take pictures of a lighthouse not far from here on Lake Michigan that she was supposed to have been able to see from her bedroom at home. Judy?
Cece Rogers taking us to the hometown of one of the 7 lost today. Miles, it just breaks your heart.
It does indeed, Judy. So once again, the United States is in mourning, this time for 7 space explorers who died early today over Texas. CNN's Bruce Morton has more.
Americans mourned in churches.
All this week, our prayers will be for the families that survived those 7 astronauts and the whole space program family.
At the Kennedy Space Center, at the White House, flags at half-staff. At NASA headquarters here, a flag and a banner, which now looks sad. Family members grieve, of course.
That's what he's dreamed of doing most of his life. That's what he said his goals to do.
The principal of astronaut David Brown's old high school
called us last year and asked if there was something that he could take from the high school up with him on this space mission. We eventually did send him a banner of the school that he brought up.
Strangers were shocked in a gym in Chicago's planetarium.
I went to space camp, and now it kind of scares me almost. So I don't know, I'm kind of second thoughts, but I want to get into that.
I'm feeling pretty bad about this accident.
Ever since Challenger crashed, I thought there was never going to be another space shuttle accident.
It's just pure shock, disbelief. This is unreal. I mean, you come out here expecting to see a shuttle land, and it's just not there.
In fact, it's just 17 years and 3 days since the shuttle Challenger exploded on takeoff. On the anniversary, Columbia Commander Rick Husband remembered that crew and 3 others who died in the 1967 fire.
Their dedication and devotion to the exploration of space was an inspiration to each of us and still motivates people around the world to achieve great things in service to others.
President Bush led the mourning for the 7 who died aboard Columbia.
The crew of the shuttle Columbia did not return safely to Earth, yet we can pray that all are safely home.
And at the NASA briefings for reporters, some voices broke.
My promise to the crew and to the crew families is that the investigation that we have just launched will find the cause, we'll fix it, and then we'll move on.
They will move on. Humankind has crossed oceans, explored continents, walked on the moon. Some kid tonight will be looking at the stars and thinking, why not? The urge to know what's out there is part of who we are. Bruce Morton, CNN, Washington.
The exploration, we hope, will continue. Let's turn it to Wolf Blitzer in Houston. Wolf?
You know, Miles, even as this investigation gets going and questions about the future of the space missions are asked, all sorts of commissions of inquiry, perhaps, that we're not even envisaging, people here in Houston at the Johnson Space Center, they're coming to the gates of this center, they're dropping off flowers, they're remembering, they're expressing their anguish, their sadness. If you take a look at the picture of these 7 astronauts, you look at them, you see the 5 men, the 2 women. Of those 5 men, 1 African-American, 1 Israeli, the Indian American woman. It's a beautiful mosaic, cut short so sadly. Miles?
Wolf Blitzer in Houston. On behalf of Wolf in Houston at the Johnson Space Center and Judy Woodruff in Washington, as well as Lou Dobbs down at the Kennedy Space Center, thank you very much for being with us for this special report. Be sure to join me again for another special report an hour from now, Columbia shuttle tragedy. That's 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific. I'm Miles O'Brien. Larry King Live is up next right here on CNN.
Welcome to a very special edition of Larry King Weekend. We'll be interviewing many people during the course of this hour. We're also going to try to include your phone calls. This is a very sad night around CNN and around the globe, and certainly at NASA. We start with 2 people particularly hit by this. Joining us on the phone are Doug and Petty Haviland. Their niece, Navy Commander Laurel Clark, MD, died on Space Shuttle Columbia today. Also on the phone with us is Laurel's brother, Dan. Doug, how did you hear about it?
Well, we checked in with CNN we knew the landing was going to take place this morning, and they weren't on yet, but then we got a call from our son, Bruce, said that there was trouble with the shuttle, and then we checked in again with CNN, and they were beginning their coverage, so we saw the footage of the breakup and so forth.
Betty, what a horrible couple of years for you. Your son, Timothy, was killed at the World Trade Center, right?
That's right. Tim had been very excited about the prospect of Laurel taking off in space and had planned to go down with his wife and 2 stepchildren to see her take off. But, of course, he was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Also on the phone with us is Dan Salton, whose sister was Laurel Clark. How did you learn, Dan?
Well, I was got up early this morning, was watching it on the internet. I actually had been watching it, the coverage, watching NASA TV live on the internet as much as I could for the last 2 weeks, and I woke up early just to soak it all in and to experience it, to hear her voice one last time, which I was able to do, and to be able to talk to her about it later. I knew that she was going to be flying down up on the flight deck this time, and I wanted to talk to her about it afterwards.
There is no way, Doug, to describe feelings at this point, is there?
No. you're kind of in shock for a while, and it was a little the feeling of, here we go again. We began to see what was taking place.
Doug, we're going to cut away for a minute, and we're going to go to a news conference being held by the relatives of the late William McCool, the pilot commander. Let's watch.
First thing she said to me this morning when I came out here and spoke with you is that you want the space exploration program to continue. This is so early. Are you still in shock, or that's what's helping you get through?
No, it's very important. It was very important to Willie. He was very much into working with children, helping them learn about science. Not only Willie, but all of the crew were very excited about this mission because it was a science research mission which they felt would have so many benefits for humanity, you know, as a whole. So, no, I think it would be a travesty if they did not continue the space program and the research programs and the knowledge that we can gain, because it helps not just us, but all of humanity with the things that can be done.
This is also a very stressful time, but you're here speaking with us in Las Vegas. When are you going to join your husband?
Tomorrow.
Had you planned on going down there for the landing, or?
No, we had not. I had seen a landing before. I went with my daughter once before. At the actual landing site, you do not see any of the crew anyway, so we just thought it would be better to wait till he got home to Houston, and then we could go down and actually visit with him, hear about his impressions on the flight and that type of thing.
Mrs. McCool, your son will be in so many people's minds tonight across the country. What is it that you want them to know about your son?
Well, I think it's a hard question. I think they should know he was very dedicated to what he was doing. He was, you know, an excellent pilot on it. I think he is very oriented toward humanity, and he was actually a very deeply religious young man as well, and just very interested in children. And one of his goals, you know, after he finished his career with the military, was to work with teaching and working with children, particularly in the area of science. He's very interested in that. So,
Mrs. McCool, it is the dream of so many children growing up to be an astronaut, a dream that your son realized. Yet watching these events that happen today can be very scary for a child. I know much of this mission was based around research projects. Schools all over the country were involved in some of those experiments. What would your words be to those children who watched today's events unfold, who at one time thought, I want to be an astronaut, and might be scared by what they saw today?
Don't give up the dream on there, because science is important to all of us, and nothing is perfect, and unfortunately his crew happened to be the one where it wasn't perfect that something happened. But they should not give up the dream. They should carry on and try to realize their potential as best they can.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Cool. You've been listening to a live press conference from Audrey McCool, mother of shuttle pilot William McCool.
That was the mother of the late William McCool, the shuttle pilot. We're talking on the phone, and we're going to hold them on the phone, with Dan Salton and Doug and Betty Haviland, the brother of and uncle and aunt, respectively, of the late Laurel Clark, M.D., Navy commander, also killed today. Joining us, though, now is Miles O'Brien, who has done yeoman-like work all day today. One of the best at covering space that I know of. His knowledge is... Where were you? You were prepared to anchor the broadcast of the landing, Miles?
Well, Larry, I actually have two jobs here at CNN. I'm a weekend anchor, and I was already up and running at 7 this morning doing my anchor job. It was just so happened my two jobs kind of intersected this morning, and we were going to talk the shuttle down as we typically do, and I spent a lot of time telling folks to take a look outside the window, because we knew that the shuttle was going to streak across the continental United States, offer up a great pre-dawn light show. As a matter of fact, I told our assignment editor here, Paul Kieran, to call all the local affiliates in the path, make sure they got a camera out there, and captured this event. What they captured was not what we expected, of course.
In all your history of covering these things, had you shown particular concern over landings?
No, the truth of the matter is, the first 8.5 minutes of the flight, Larry, is when we get most of the concern and most of the attention. That's when you have the potential explosive power of a small nuclear bomb, but you want to make sure it's unleashed in the right direction. And so we watch that 8.5 minutes of powered ascent, as they call it, from the launch pad all the way to space very closely. And the sense you get is once it arrives in orbit, the worst is over, if you will. Well, it's second on the list of concerns would be that return to Earth when the shuttle undergoes tremendous stress, 3,000-degree heat, and quite frankly, perhaps we didn't have as much attention paid to it as it should.
Was there any verbal warning of anything imminent?
No, it came very quickly. A very abrupt conversation and no indication from the crew that they had any indication of what was coming up. We do know that there are a few sensor warnings which came just prior to the communication loss. The sensors went out. There was a conversation, a transmission from Rick Husband, the shuttle commander, sort of half of a Roger, if you will, that kind of thing, and it was all over. The things happened very quickly.
We'll take a break and come right back. Miles will remain with us. We'll talk to some eyewitnesses and some more phone conversation with the relatives as well. This is a special edition of Larry King Weekend. We'll be right back.
We have booster ignition and liftoff of Space Shuttle Columbia with a multitude of national and international space research experiments.
Well, good morning, Houston. Had a great time on orbit and really excited to come back home.
The Columbia is lost. There are no survivors. At 9 o'clock this morning, Mission Control in Houston lost contact with our Space Shuttle Columbia. A short time later, debris was seen falling from the skies above Texas. The Columbia is lost. There are no survivors. On board was a crew of 7. Colonel Rick Husband, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Anderson, Commander Laurel Clark, Captain David Brown, Commander William McCool, Dr. Kulbna Shavla, and Ilan Ramon, a colonel in the Israeli Air Force.
We'll talk to some eyewitnesses in just a moment, but I want a couple other quick things with Dan Salton and Doug and Betty Haviland on the phone, and we'll get back to Miles O'Brien, too. Dan, I heard you talking during the break with your with the uncle and aunt. There will be some kind of service in Houston on Monday, is that right?
No, I don't think it'll necessarily be on Monday. All I'm hearing right now from NASA is that we should come down. We want to support the family. We want to support John Clark and Ian as much as we can, and we're going to wait to go down until Monday is what we're hearing. And the soonest, NASA does hope to do something for us, for the families, and the soonest that will happen is Tuesday.
And that will be in Houston, not Florida?
That's correct, in Houston.
Well, we would be glad to be there and assist in whatever way we can.
Correct. Doug and Betty, you're going to go, right?
If it's possible, yes.
Have you spoken to your brother-in-law, Dan?
To my brother-in-law, John, no, I have not talked to him directly. I have talked to people who are in contact with him, and tonight his brother, Dave Clark from Tennessee, is heading down there, and my brother, John Salton from Albuquerque, is flying down there, and they're going to be with them as of about 9 o'clock tonight. So.
And how old is your
And
sister's?
where is Lynn at this point?
How old is your sister's son?
Ian is 8 years old, and he's the one we are most concerned about.
Yeah, you bet.
He's the one that we're going to support. He's the one who needs us the most.
Thank you very much, Doug and Betty Haviland, Dan Salton. Thanks so much for talking with us, and please acknowledge our deep concern.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and you're welcome.
Joining us in Dallas are Gary Hunziker and his wife Liz Hunziker, and they were eyewitnesses. Gary, where were you and what did you see?
That's correct. About 8 this morning, we stepped out the back door to the patio to witness the overflight of the shuttle. I heard last night that it would be overflying about 8:03, and I was determined I wanted to see it. It was very easy to spot initially. When we stepped out, there was a very prominent contrail behind it, and the shuttle itself was very brightly lit by the morning sun. To the naked eye, at least, everything looked normal. I saw nothing that would make me the least suspicious that anything was wrong. I did have a pair of binoculars with me, and I was hoping to get a better view through those. Shuttle was moving very fast. I'd never seen it before, so I was kind of surprised how fast it moved. Had a devil of a time getting it in the binoculars. When I finally did, my immediate reaction to Liz was there are already some chase jets with it. I saw two bright spots slightly behind on each side of the shuttle, and I thought what I was seeing at that point were some chase jets escorting the shuttle in. About 15 minutes later, I turned on the television. I figured since we saw the overflight, I would like to see the landing. And of course, the first thing I heard when I turned the television on is at 8 a.m. They had lost all visual and radar contact with the shuttle. Then they went on to say that the shuttle was flying at 12,000 miles per hour and at 200,000 feet. And instantly it struck me, certainly what I saw couldn't have been chase jets. What I saw must have been debris.
And Liz, what was your reaction?
Well, my morning started off, I was just thrilled that I could witness the shuttle flying over. It was a beautiful day in Dallas today. Absolutely blue skies, very clear. I was really taken by the amount of jet stream that was behind the shuttle. And initially, because I was just looking up at the sky, I did not see what Gary had witnessed and thought were the jets until I had backed up and kind of changed angles. And then I was able to see these other, what I thought were jet streams, and obviously, as we found out minutes later, were not. And so my excitement really turned to one of just disbelief. It kind of reminded me of the day that we witnessed the Challenger. It's just it was very difficult, and our hearts go out to their families, and just a difficult day.
In retrospect, Gary, you saw nothing then break off. You thought it was just two planes following them.
I didn't. I looked at it with the naked eye for only a few seconds and then was really working trying to get it in binoculars. And when I got it in binoculars, I had such a narrow field of vision that I really didn't see much except the shuttle and just the debris very, very near to it. But it wasn't evident to me that it was breaking up. No, I had no feeling that way at all. Not until I heard the news reports later. Then I realized what I'd actually seen.
Thank you, Gary and Liz. Thanks for talking with us. Back to Miles O'Brien in Atlanta, who is our weekend anchor and who is our CNN space correspondent. They're not going to find every piece of debris, are they, Miles? I mean, that's illogical.
I can't imagine they would, Larry. You know, there aren't many very big pieces. The biggest piece we've seen is about 4 feet in length. Most of them are very small, and we're talking about a debris field which could begin in Arizona and end in Louisiana, quite literally. Certainly more of the debris is concentrated in that area of Texas, but nevertheless, there are so many little pieces over such a broad area. Quite frankly, that smoking gun piece may be elusive.
Meaning we may never know?
Well, certainly finding a piece that gave you some clear-cut guidance that perhaps a tile fell off or a cluster of tiles fell off, that kind of thing would offer conclusive proof. But there are other ways of finding these things out as well. I'm told tonight, Larry, they're looking at the possibility that these flaps on the rear portion of the shuttle, they're called elevons, it controls the up-down, the pitch, as they call it. There was some unusual movement in those immediately prior to the disintegration. What that means, I don't know. They can find a piece of the elevon, for example, that might offer them some clues. I think it's really important to point out, if people see these pieces, to stay away from them, because not only are they potentially toxic, monomethylhydrazine, nasty stuff, can give you cancer, can burn you, nitrogen tetroxide, same stuff, terrible stuff. But on top of that, if you're interested in souvenirs, it could be a souvenir which might be, in fact, proof of what happened to the Space Shuttle Columbia. Wouldn't that be awful if that became some kind of strange souvenir?
And one other thing, Miles, can we take solace in the fact that at that altitude and at that speed, they were gone in a second?
I think that's probably safe to say, Larry. I think things happen very, very quickly up there.
Miles, yeoman-like work. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Miles O'Brien, CNN space correspondent, weekend anchor. When we come back, we're going to talk to an extraordinary lady, June Scobie Rogers. She's the widow of Francis Dick Scobie. He was the commander of the Challenger. Still to come on this edition of Larry King Weekend, a special edition, we'll talk with astronauts Alan Bean, Jerry Leininger, and Scott Carpenter. We'll talk with Walter Cronkite and Senator Bill Nelson, who went up on a space flight. That's all ahead. We'll be right back.
We're devastated because of the events that unfolded this morning. There's a certain amount of shock in our system because we have suffered the loss of 7 family members. And we're learning to deal with that.
We're a very rookie crew, a very young crew. We have 4 rookies, first-time flyers, and 3 one-time flyers. So as you can see, compared to the average shuttle crew today, we're a very inexperienced crew. So knowing that, we've gone to great lengths to make sure that our inexperience isn't something that's going to hamper us. We've worked very closely, worked hard together over the last 2 years to make this mission a success.
That was astronaut Michael Anderson. And before we talk with June Scobie-Rogers, whose husband piloted the Challenger, we're going to make contact with David Neal in Rusk, Texas, who was also an eyewitness. David, what did you see?
Good evening. I was outside at the Palestine airport where we have our normal monthly fly-in, and I happen to be looking upwards, looking for any aircraft. And I look up and I see a bright object. My only guess is, you know, a passenger jet with a large contrail. But it immediately thereafterwards started fanning out the little pieces, very bright blue colors. And so I immediately called the airport manager, who then calls Fort Worth Center. And supposedly we're the first people to call on that. At first, you know, that's all we thought it was, a passenger jet. And we were very afraid that we had just witnessed maybe a terrorist attack of some sort. And then going inside, waiting to hear some news of it on the news, we then learned it was the space shuttle.
David, did you see anything that looked like a fire?
I did not see anything look like a fire. I just saw what looked like the sun reflecting off an airplane. And then it started to turn a blue color and a lot of little pieces coming off of it and fanning out in all different directions.
Wasn't it going remarkably fast to you?
Yes, it was. And being in the aviation business for as long as I was, I didn't believe it could be at 200,000 feet like they have been reporting, because there were contrails even on the little pieces that were coming off of it. And it did seem to be going very fast.
You think it was lower than 200,000 feet based on your experience with flight?
Yes, sir. And a lot of the other pilots there at the airport believe the same thing.
That's interesting. We'll follow up on that. You thought it was lower.
Yeah,
David, thanks very much. David Neal, an eyewitness on the scene in Rusk, Texas at the airport. We'll be calling on you again. Joining us now from Chattanooga, Tennessee is June Scobie-Rogers, the widow of Francis Dick Scobie, who was commander of the Challenger on January 28, 1986. Where were you this morning, June?
I was at home. I just turned on the television while I was emptying the dishwasher, and when I heard lost communications, I dropped everything. Brought back some terrible memories from my family. It's a tragedy for the entire nation, isn't it?
You're the founding chairman of the Challenger Center for Space Science Education. You've stayed deeply involved in this. You've remarried, right?
I have. I met Don Rogers, a general in the Army at Arlington on Easter, and his wife had died, and we became good friends, and we've moved here to Chattanooga. And the Challenger Center is, all the families came together to say, you know, the world knew how our loved ones died, and we want the world to know how they lived. And the families for the Columbia crew must be devastated with the numbing shock that we know so well.
What would you say to them?
Just to take each day, one day at a time, to feel the love of family and friends, and to know that their loved ones have touched the face of God, that they're in God's hands. They were heroes. They were heroes like our firemen and police and our military. They were serving their country with a dream, vision of what was needed for space exploration. And they were wonderful examples to our nation.
And they knew the dangers, didn't they?
They know. When you're working in that field, in space exploration, they're pioneers for the country, for our planet. They take that risk knowingly, and that makes them even that much greater a hero.
We're going to take a break and come back with June Scobie Rogers and talk more about living after such a tragedy. She lived with it after Challenger, and today we have Columbia, and then we'll meet a major panel get-together on this special edition of Larry King Weekend. We'll have another one tomorrow night, and joining us among the guests will be one of the veteran space correspondents ever, Hugh Downs. Don't go away.
And when you look out the window, you're not looking at the stars or the moon, you're looking at the Earth. And when you look at the Earth, invariably people say that they think about people, and they invariably say they think about the people that they kind of know and care about.
That was the late Captain David Brown. June Scobie Rogers, widow of Francis Dick Scobie, commander of the Challenger. Do you think that as a society we're kind of sanguine now about space travel, that unless something like this happens, we treat it as just another day of flight?
I was so happy for NASA that safety was the first issue that they were concerned about every day. That's their focus.
But the public, do you think the public gave much thought to it?
I think that they looked at it more than likely like any flight, any airplane flight. It's another mission. But I know the astronauts and their families didn't look at it that way. It's truly a tragedy for that loss.
You lost your husband, now your son. Is that true? He flies F-16s in the reserves?
My son is an F-16 pilot, Rich Scobie. I've talked to him the first thing this morning and several times today. And I've talked to my daughter, Kathy. They're wonderful, wonderful children. And it's very difficult for Dick Scobie's parents. The commander husband had just sent a message on the 28th of January to say it was the anniversary for the loss of Challenger, and he wished well the families and the Challenger crew. It's so unfortunate that the families of Columbia didn't get to greet them and congratulate them on a successful mission.
Is there a chance your son might go to the Gulf?
My son might be called to duty, as will many sons. And it's a difficult time in our nation. It's a traumatic time, I'm sure, for our president. He gave a wonderful message to the Columbia crew today. My heart is to him as well, as he is so concerned with our nation at a time when we may be close to war and loss of a space shuttle crew. Our nation, indeed the world, is in disaster today.
Thank you, June. Good seeing you. Good seeing you looking so well, too. June Scobie Rogers, the widow of Francis Dick Scobie, commander of the Challenger. Now, when we come back, on the phone with Walter Cronkite, and we'll visit with Scott Carpenter, an original Mercury 7 astronaut, Jerry Leininger, the former NASA astronaut and retired U.S. Navy Medical Corps captain, Alan Bean, former astronaut, was the lunar module pilot for Apollo 12. That was the second lunar landing. And Senator Bill Nelson, Democrat of Florida, one of the leading congressional experts on NASA, who made a space flight himself. They're all next, right after this.
This is indeed a tragic day for the NASA family. for the families of the astronauts who flew on STS-107, and likewise tragic for the nation. We trust that the prayers of the nation will be with them and with their families. And again, a more courageous group of people you could not have hoped to know.
For me, it doesn't really affect me because I'm just so focused on the mission and the training. And gosh, I've got a Navy background. I've been flying off carriers and doing light landings and dealt with pitching decks in bad weather. So you just kind of get immuneness in a sense to the environment around you, and you deal with it. And that's pretty much my attitude with regard to the 9/11 events. And I guess I have more concern maybe for my family. I just want to do everything I can to put them at ease. And I know that NASA has done a wonderful job in coping with the necessity for new security measures, and I think they've done a good job in doing that and have given comfort to me and my crewmates, and in particular our families along those lines.
That was the late Commander William McCool. Joining us now on the phone is Walter Cronkite, former anchor and managing editor of the CBS Evening News. He's anchored CBS's coverage of multiple space shots and the Apollo Moon program, of course. Scott Carpenter is in Phoenix, Arizona. It's good to see him again. One of the original Mercury 7 astronauts. He flew America's second manned orbital flight on May 24th of 1962. In Traverse City, Michigan, is Jerry Linenger, former NASA astronaut and retired U.S. Navy Medical Corps captain. He flew on the STS-64 aboard the Shuttle Discovery. In Houston is Alan Bean, former NASA astronaut, retired U.S. Navy captain, was lunar module pilot for Apollo 12, the second lunar landing, and was the fourth man to step on the moon. And in Washington is Senator Bill Nelson, Democrat of Florida, one of the leading congressional experts on NASA. And while a member of the House, he served as chairman of the subcommittee on science, space, and technology, trained and flew as a crew member of STS-61C, a 6-day mission of the Columbia in January of '86. Scott, what's your reaction to the occurrence this morning? Scott Carpenter first.
Okay, Larry, I think it is important now for us to do two things. First, to express our condolences to the bereaved families. And the second, maybe even more important, is to realize that space exploration has become and will continue to be a vital part of our national character. We lost some wonderful young men and women today, but there are many more coming along who will gladly take their place. We will find the problem. We will select the way to cure it. We will be in flight again soon because it is part of the national character. All you have to do is admit that the benefits justify taking the risks. Many are willing to do that. Yeah. We will persevere and we will prevail and we will get back soon on the road to Mars.
Walter Cronkite, do you think that the public at large was taking it as just another day and had lost interest generally in the daily coverage of space?
No, I don't believe anybody, Larry, can think of this as just another day. It's really, it seems that we are destined to be reminded from time to time of the dangers that we face in the exploration of space. We become pretty blasé about the success of our shuttle flights and begin to pay little attention to them until attention is called by a tragedy like this one today. And I was thinking so much of Scott Carpenter today, and it's a delight to be with you, Scott, on this particular occasion. Sorry that we've got this occasion to do it on, but I remember Scott Carpenter's re-entry into the atmosphere after the second Mercury flight, and the communications went out. And while the space control was getting information, telemetry, that indicated that he was all right and gotten through this black period coming into the extreme pressure of the atmosphere from outer space. We did not know that he was all right for almost 45 minutes. And we understood how dangerous it was getting back into the atmosphere with that extreme heat on that speeding vehicle. And most of us thought that we'd lost Scott.
I remember that well. Let me ask Jerry Lindinger, what is it like in re-entry?
Re-entry is very dynamic. You're inside a fireball. Everything's moving around you. A lot of vibration, violent. You know that you are on the edge. Any astronaut that's flown in space during re-entry, I think, realize it is a critical phase of flight, and if something goes a little bit wrong, you're out of control.
And what do you mean by a little bit wrong? Give me an example.
It doesn't take much. Well, if you're, for example, your guidance or your control, if you tip the wing a little further than it should be tipped, if a tile comes undone in a critical spot, you've got fire all around, you've got tremendous heat, especially at Mach 18, you got about 3,000 degrees on the underbelly of the shuttle, and if you've got a weak link in there, if you've got a missing tile, it melts through the aluminum, hits a critical component, and once that chain reaction of bad things starts happening, it's a runaway train, and that's what we got into today.
Alan Bean, was re-entry a concern for you?
I'd say so. Of course, launch is the most critical time because that's the time when most things have to work right. Entry is the second most critical, and these two things stand out among all of them because they're about the only two times in space flight where you get doing something, and if something starts to go wrong a little bit, you can't stop and fix it. In launch, you're just going to keep launching, and you may discover you've got a problem, and if it can't solve itself almost, you're sunk. In the same way with entry. You start entering in gravity and speed, you're going to keep entering until you've slowed down greatly, and if something starts to go wrong, and as Jerry says, it doesn't take much. We forget sometimes how difficult it is to fly a spaceship in from Mach 20 all the way down to landing speed at about Mach 0.3 and have it work right. It just seems like it's easy, but it's not. It takes our best engineering and skill.
Senator Nelson, before we take a break, were you concerned about landing when you went up?
Larry, you stuff any kind of fear. You're so focused on what you're doing, but you realize the risk. And it's a part that the crew understands, but the American people think that it's as routine as getting in a car and taking a Sunday afternoon drive. It isn't.
We'll take a break and come right back with our outstanding panel. Don't go away.
It's a truly difficult day for all of us. Many of us were standing alongside the runway waiting to celebrate their triumphant return after a 16-day science mission. Sadly, I think from the video that's available, it does not appear that there were any survivors.
Well, good morning, Houston. We're getting ready for a big day up here. Had a great time on orbit and really excited to come back home. Hearing that song reminds me of all the different places down on Earth and all the friends and family that I have all over the world. Thanks, and it's been great working with you and all the other folks.
Scott Carpenter, is there some sort of cockpit recording device like they have on jetliners in shuttles?
No, Larry, don't have that.
What was it like when you were re-entering and had that problem?
It is exciting. It goes...
Good word.
The entry is part of a flight regime where the status of the flight is rapidly changing. And you have to be very careful that and assure that everything goes right. It's quite a fireworks display. You've got a lot of important things to watch happen, but it's something that training prepares you for. And if everything goes right, You come back safely. Unfortunately, today,
Did not.
that did not happen.
Jerry Lininger, do you think they had a warning?
I know they had a little warning about tire pressure from what I've heard. You know, all the little indicators. I think the people on Earth started seeing a few sensors go out, and I think they were starting to get worried. But I think the people on board, I think it hit them very rapidly with very little to react to. And even if it had been a warning that something bad was happening, not a lot they can do when you're going 12,000 miles an hour at that critical part of flight.
Alan Bean, one of our people before who was viewing it from the ground and who works at an airport as a veteran of these things, swore that that was lower than 200,000 feet. He thought it was a jetliner.
Well, first of all, he thinks that's a contrail, which means condensation trail, which means the fuel from your jet engine, the unburned fuel freezes, and that makes the white trails behind airplanes. Well, that isn't what was going on with the shuttle at 200,000 feet. There's no water behind it. What you're seeing is heat from the heat shield, and it's making sort of a smoky residue. So it's a completely different thing. And if you think it's contrails, they only work up to about 45,000, 50,000 feet. So, you know, that's what confused him.
Senator Nelson, and you and Walter Cronkite are two civilians, in a sense, who went up. Would you go again?
I would, Larry. And I said that 17 years ago, almost at this exact time, having our crew just returned to Earth, 10 days later, Challenger launched and blew up. I was asked that question then, and I think most anyone on a crew would go again. It's
Walter, do you regret? I'm sorry.
It's important, Larry, it's important to the future of this country. We are, as a character of American people, by nature, explorers and adventurers. And we never want to give that up. If we do, we're a second-rate nation. And that's why we have to overcome this problem and get back into the flight.
Walter, do you regret that you never went?
Oh, very much so, Larry, very much so. I think it's one of the great disappointments of my life that I never got up there. I followed the space program from the very beginning and wanted to get aboard. I thought I was on the short list to make the trip that eventually went to a school teacher, and we lost McAuliffe, of course, on that Challenger trip. But the adventure of it, the experience would be inevitably great. Do you know, I was impressed today, I wonder if others were, with the fact that we had those incredible amateur pictures of the approach of the Columbia, and whether it was whether it was smoke or contrail or whatever. It seems to me that NASA's got some incredible pictures of the Columbia really almost peeling apart. You could see the parts coming off of it, and I would think that as they carefully examine those pictures, they're going to be able to determine what parts those were even, and it might simplify the search for what happened and why.
Isn't that a good point, Alan Bean?
I think it is a really good point. They're going to study those, and they have other cameras that no one has probably taken a look at yet, the film, because they don't want to take a chance of losing it. And they're going to spend a lot of time studying this, and I think they're going to be able to, you know, pinpoint exactly when something gave way and sort of what maybe it was, and put that together with the telemetry. And they'll have a step-by-step, in tenth of a second by tenth of a second timeline before too long, talking about what happened where, and then they'll back up with that and say what could have caused this, and then they'll probably go from there. So I'm sure they're working on that now, collecting this other film.
Senator Nelson, Scott Carpenter was very confident they will find the answer to what went wrong. Are you?
I am, Larry. When you add everything that everyone has said with the fact that there are pieces of the wreckage on the ground in a pattern that went in a southeasterly direction across Texas, and if the public is responding as responsibly as it apparently is, leaving those pieces of wreckage alone and notifying the authorities, they're going to get a lot of evidence from that.
Scott, everybody is gathering in Houston, the families and the like. Do former astronauts go to those things? Are you going to go?
Time will tell. I'm not sure yet, Larry.
Do you keep involved in the space program, Scott?
Of course, we all go back to Houston for our annual physicals with a newly installed medical corps, which includes geriatric surgeons.
Jerry, do you think this will diminish the program at all, that people are going to sour on it?
I don't think so. You know, those astronauts are brave souls, and I think we need to carry on. I have to say something, Larry, to Walter Cronkite. He lived vicariously through me, because when I was 14 years old and the people I'm on this show with were up there on the moon, he once was doing a broadcast and got a tear in his eye and was so choked up he couldn't talk. We were on the moon, and I said, I want to do that someday. And so Walter Cronkite helped inspire me to become an astronaut. So he lived through us, and I think all of us astronauts lived through each other. And that was one fine crew up there today, and the future astronauts will be on their shoulders.
Walter, how does that make you feel?
Well, that makes me pretty proud to know that I contributed that great man to the space program, and I appreciate the kind words.
Alan Bean, do you miss it?
I miss it a lot. I left there some 22 years ago, and I think about, particularly when they're doing something exciting like EVA or repairing the Hubble Space Telescope or assembling the space station. I'll tell you, today, one of the things that's happened in the space program is the person the astronaut, whether it's male or female, they get the excitement and honors and everything else of going into space, but their mates that are home, male or female, depending, they just get a lot of the worry. And when
we're out of time, Alan, but I'll tell you what, we're going to have you back, okay?
Sure, fine.
No, Alan.
We're going to have you all back.
Alan, we think of the
We're out of time, Walter.
Also...
We're out of time, but you can talk to him off the air. Walter Cronkite, Scott Carpenter, Jerry Linenger, Alan Bean, and Senator Bill Nelson. We're going to have them all back. There'll be another special edition of Larry King Weekend tomorrow night at our regular time. Anderson Cooper will follow us with more live coverage throughout the night. Thanks for joining us, and sad good night.
This is CNN.
The Columbia's lost. There are no survivors.
Many mourn the loss of 7 astronauts as the space shuttle Columbia disintegrates in the skies over Texas. People and police discover pieces of the spacecraft on the ground, and the astronauts' families in India, Israel, and the United States remember their loved ones. I'm Zane Verge at the CNN Center. This is World News. It was the 28th flight for U.S. Space Shuttle Columbia, and the 16-day mission had gone well. The 7-member crew was on its way home. Frederica Whitfield looks at the day that began well, but ended in tragedy.
Early Saturday, before sunrise in Florida, good weather was expected at the shuttle's landing site at the Kennedy Space Center. The mission's only glitch so far had been a pair of malfunctioning dehumidifiers, which raised temperatures inside the shuttle's laboratory payload module slightly higher than desired. As the sun rose in Cape Canaveral, Florida, the early morning fog burned off, and Mission Control gave the 7 astronauts the go-ahead to come home on time. Mission Control radioed the instructions. You are go for the deorbit burn. Shortly afterwards, Columbia begins its descent. These were the last words heard from Columbia.
And Columbia, Houston, we see your tire pressure messages, and we did not copy your last.
Roger.
At about 9 a.m. Eastern Time, NASA officials lost contact with Columbia as it soared over north-central Texas. The craft was at an altitude of about 200,000 feet, traveling at 12,500 miles per hour, and was about 16 minutes away from the estimated landing time. The loss of contact was the first sign of any trouble.
Communications with Columbia were lost at about 8 a.m. Central Time, about 10 minutes ago.
Fearing the worst, NASA ordered flight controllers to pull out emergency procedures and ordered them to retain all their records. There was no further communication and no further tracking data. Debris was found across a large area of southeast Texas. NASA issued a warning that any debris in the area should not be handled because it's hazardous. Frederica Whitfield, CNN.
The catastrophic explosion of the Space Shuttle Columbia was captured by several weather satellites. Doppler radar in the city of Shreveport, Louisiana, captured the plume and debris after the shuttle exploded. You can see the red streak going from west to east over the skies of East Texas and heading over the border into Louisiana in that picture. U.S. President George W. Bush had intended to spend the weekend at Camp David Presidential Retreat in the state of Maryland, but news of the tragedy brought him back to the White House early. Suzanne Malveaux reports.
In honor of those lost, the flag at the White House lowered at half staff. President Bush once again charged with carrying out the somber duty of bringing the nation together in time of tragedy.
My fellow Americans, this day has brought terrible news and great sadness to our country. At 9 o'clock this morning, Mission Control in Houston lost contact with our Space Shuttle Columbia. A short time later, debris was seen falling from the skies above Texas. The Columbia is lost. There are no survivors.
6 Americans and 1 Israeli lost, people the president said assumed great risk in the service to all humanity.
The cause in which they died will continue. Mankind is led into the darkness beyond our world by the inspiration of discovery and the longing to understand. Our journey into space will go on.
Just after 9 o'clock this morning at Camp David, President Bush is notified by his chief of staff that NASA has lost contact with the shuttle. At 10:30, he's briefed by NASA's director and decides to return to the White House early. The Situation Room at the White House goes into full gear, notifying all the principals. By 12:30, the president is back in the Oval Office when NASA's director tells him there are no survivors. 15 minutes later, Mr. Bush, standing at his desk, holds a conference call with the victims' families who are gathered around a speakerphone at the Kennedy Space Center. He tells them, "We express our love and appreciation for all those who died today. I want the loved ones to know there are millions of Americans praying for you, including me and Laura. It's an incredibly tough day for you. May God bless you all. I wish I was there to hug, cry, and comfort you right now." In a poignant moment, a White House aide who was with the president says after the call, a somber Mr. Bush briefly excused himself to the executive residence. The president also called Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon to offer his condolences for the Israeli astronaut lost. And the president received calls from world leaders from Mexico, Canada, and even those recently at odds with the president over his stand with Iraq, France, and Russia.
It was a big test for the Department of Homeland Security. Its new Secretary, Governor Tom Ridge, able to collect and assess information quickly to assign FEMA the lead role in recovery and to reassure the American people that no matter how tragic this disaster was, it was not the result of terrorism. Suzanne Malveaux, CNN, the White House.
NASA started an investigation into the cause of the accident, and all shuttle flights are on hold. The next shuttle launch had been scheduled for the 1st of March. The investigation may yield valuable information for NASA in the end, but that's not where the thoughts of officials were on Saturday.
My thoughts are not on what I hope to come out of this tragedy. My thoughts are still on what happened this morning. My thoughts are on 7 families, children, spouses, extended family. My thoughts are on their grief. My thoughts are on what we missed, what I missed to allow this to happen. It's going to be a difficult day for all of us.
Debris from Colombia rained down onto fields and highways in Texas and in neighboring Louisiana. Human remains, which officials are treating as if they are from the shuttle, have been found in Hemphill, Texas. There have been no reports of injuries on the ground. The debris appears to be scattered over an area of more than 300 square kilometers. Again, people who find anything are advised not to touch it because it may be toxic, and they're also being told to call local authorities. A symbol of hope for Israel vanished when its first astronaut was lost in Colombia's explosion. Ilan Ramon is being mourned by his countrymen as, quote, the best we could offer. Kelly Wallace has more from Jerusalem.
In Israel, outside the home of Colonel Ilan Ramon's father, candles mark the 7 lives lost. And friends come to remember his son, a hometown hero, the first Israeli to soar through space. My son and I sat together just recently. We could not have imagined what was about to happen, Ramon's father said, before rushing to the airport to fly to Texas. Fellow Israelis from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem couldn't imagine it either.
Terribly shocked. I know, it's like major league disaster.
Ramon's liftoff to space was something to celebrate, a ray of hope, so many said, after 28 months of violence.
I just keep thinking that nothing goes right in this country nowadays.
The 48-year-old Air Force fighter pilot who fought for Israel in 2 wars and who took part in the dramatic Israeli bombing of a nuclear reactor in Iraq in 1981, told family and friends via email the 16-day mission was his proudest accomplishment.
There was euphoria and great joy because it was the realization of Ilan's greatest dream.
Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon spoke with Ramon in space just 10 days ago. After the tragedy, in a phone call with U.S. President Bush, the Prime Minister said the hearts of the American and Israeli people are bonded together.
And at these difficult moments, we're holding hands together, and together we pray.
Ramon is the son of Holocaust survivors. He carried with him a drawing from a 14-year-old Jewish boy who died in the Holocaust, and he took the Jewish tradition into outer space.
He was the first astronaut to observe Shabbat in space. He took kosher food. It was a real beautiful experience for the Jewish people. It was something that the Jewish people could be very proud of.
Colonel Ramon's wife, Rona, and his 4 children now must cope with the unthinkable. Ramon's brother has gone to Texas to comfort the family, remembering the last email he received from Ramon just 2 days ago.
He said that he's so happy that he doesn't want to come back to us. And he didn't come back to us.
Kelly Wallace, CNN, Jerusalem.
Kalpana Chawla made history in 1997 when she became the first woman of Indian descent to go into space. Now her home city in India mourns her loss. Satinder Bindra joins us now from Karnal in India by video phone. Satinder?
That's right, then Indians grieving along with Americans. This is a very, very sad moment for them, and all the Indian newspapers this morning are leading with the story of the tragedy. This is a small town just north of New Delhi. It's about a 2-hour car drive north of India's capital, New Delhi. And right at the moment then, I'm standing by the Tagore School in Karnal. This is where Kalpana Chawla attended school in the mid-1970s. Late last night, then, some hundreds of students had gathered here to celebrate the touchdown of Kalpana Chawla, but their joy quickly turned into an overwhelming sense of grief. I mentioned Kalpana Chawla was here in the mid-1970s. When she graduated, she went on to become the first Indian woman to get a degree in aeronautical engineering from the University of Punjab, which is just north of here. In the 80s, Kalpana Chawla migrated to the United States, where she got a master's degree in aeronautical engineering. She then took a PhD, and in 1994, she was selected for NASA. In 1997, she became one of the first people of Indian descent to fly a mission in space. Of course, she was a senior member of the current Space Shuttle team, and just late last night, her family shared with the rest of the world their deep sense of grief and loss.
When you're involved in such a profession, you need to be ready for this kind of news. I was just telling my friends that if you're in the Army or Air Force or any such field, you should be ready to receive such news. When this can happen to others, it can also happen to you. This time, such a tragedy has befallen our family, but our relatives and friends and the people of Karnal are all sharing our grief.
Now, then, a prayer service will be held at Kalpana Chawla's former school. We expect this prayer ceremony to begin in about a few hours. Kalpana Chawla was a United States citizen, but she never cut off her ties with her home country. And every year then, she took 2 students from here to NASA. She's a very, very large figure here, a very prominent Indian, and she's being referred to as, quote, the pride of India in these days of loss and mourning. I should also add that given her stature, the Indian Prime Minister, Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, sent a letter of condolences to Mr. Bush just yesterday as well. Then, now back to you.
Are coming to terms with their mourning. This was true across the nation. It was true from the very youngest in schools around the country, even from the first grades, the early grades. The children were brought face to face with the tragedy that the nation as a whole has been coming to terms with as Israel mourns, along with the United States, the death of the 7 astronauts. Coming to grips with this new pain that has replaced the hope. In one of the headlines of the Israeli newspaper, top newspaper, it said, "Remnants of a dream." That was the message that was given out in that newspaper. And the other newspaper, they talk about crying for Ilan. Remnants of a dream is the headline here. Crying for a dream, very much the message. Crying for Ilan, the message in other Israeli newspapers. Ilan Ramon himself, as he had spoken from space during the mission, had talked of the vulnerability, as he sensed it, of the planet, of the whole of the planet Earth. And he spoke of the smallness of his own country. These are messages which are now resonating with his fellow Israelis. And they came up in some way or another at the cabinet table, where Israel's Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, alongside him sitting the U.S. ambassador in Tel Aviv, Dan Kurtzer, expressed condolences of a nation to the people of the United States and to the space community as a whole. And Mr. Sharon lauded Ilan Ramon as a man, as a bold fighter pilot, he said, who should not have been taken from us and have left us without our dreams, without our hopes in this way. But Mr. Sharon was emphatic. He said the space exploration ought to go on, and he vowed there would be more Israeli astronauts who would follow Ilan Ramon into space. The Israeli and U.S. flags flew at half-staff outside the Prime Minister's office as Mr. Sharon and his cabinet turned back to something from which Israelis have been briefly diverted for the last week or so, as they did focus on the mission, on the space mission, to the pressing problems at home, the pressing problems of their battles with the Palestinians, their own domestic political problems, and the possibility that the whole of the region, the Middle East, will be involved in a broader conflagration. But for now, they are mourning. Anand?
Thank you, Gerald. Gerald Kessel there from Jerusalem. In the United States, family members are remembering the 6 American astronauts. Kathleen Koch talked to one family caught up in a terrible nightmare.
They were just wonderful.
A stunned mother who just weeks ago had traveled with her husband to Florida for Columbia's launch, whose son, mission specialist David Brown, had taped a cheerful pre-flight message.
I grew up dreaming about the space program, but never really thought I'd ever get a chance to do it. I can assure you that my crew and I are in great spirits.
Dorothy and Paul Brown were home waiting to see the landing on television when they heard communication had been lost, and a NASA phone call confirmed their fears.
We're a bit numb right now. It's sort of unbelievable, you see, that he's just gone.
Like so many, they thought the most dangerous part of the flight was over and the landing would be safe.
People were starting to, again, think that it was routine, weren't they?
Yes. Yeah. It shows you that can't take anything for granted.
It was the first flight for David, a Navy captain, doctor, and pilot. The Virginia native, part of a large class of NASA hopefuls who started astronaut training in 1996.
He was in the sardine class. Instead of 6 or 7 people, they took in over 100 in 1 year. And so they called them the sardines.
David had taken a Thanksgiving photo of his family with him into space. He'd emailed his parents from orbit, the final message coming Friday afternoon.
The views of the Earth are really beautiful. If you've ever seen a space IMAX movie, that's really what it looks like.
The Browns say David understood the risks of spaceflight and discussed them with his older brother.
What if you were to die? And Dave just said, this program will go on. It has to go on.
David's parents, proud believers in their son's dream, even if in the end it leaves him with no final resting place.
We saw the debris come down in the newsreel, photographs, and I'd like to have something of Dave to bury. It may not happen.
Kathleen Koch, CNN, Rappahannock County, Virginia.
Guten Tag, verehrte Zuschauer. Nach dem Columbia-Unglück suchen Experten der Raumfahrtbehörde NASA nach den Ursachen der Katastrophe. Von Trümmern und Flugdaten erhoffen sie sich Aufschluss darüber, warum die Raumfähre beim Eintritt in die Erdatmosphäre auseinanderbrach. Die 7 Astronauten an Bord kamen ums Leben. Die NASA stoppte sofort alle Shuttle-Flüge auf unbestimmte Zeit.
Ein verkohlter Raumfahrerhelm. Ein Namensschild, Husband McCool Ramon Anderson, ist zu erkennen. Auf einer Landstraße bei Texas wird ein verkohlter menschlicher Oberkörper gefunden. Für eine Identifikation ist es noch zu früh. Über eine Fläche von 1280 Quadratkilometern verteilen sich die Trümmerteile. Mit großer Wucht sind sie eingeschlagen. Hier in Nacogdoches haben sie einen LKW-Anhänger durchschlagen. Aus der Rekonstruktion der Trümmer erhofft sich die NASA Aufschlüsse über die Unglücksursache. Wir stellen überall in der Gegend die Teile sicher und wir sammeln die letzten Informationen, die uns die Crew durchgegeben hat. Die ersten Anzeichen waren ein Druckabfall im linken Rad und der Ausfall von Temperaturfühlern im linken Flügel. Am linken Flügel hat es schon beim Start einen Vorfall gegeben. Ein Teil des großen Flüssigkeitstanks brach ab und streifte den Flügel. Mindestens eine Hitzekachel wurde abgerissen. Die NASA entschied, die Mission fortzusetzen. Der Vorfall sei nicht kritisch. Die 17.000 Hitzekacheln schützen das Shuttle vor dem Verglühen beim Wiedereintritt in die Atmosphäre. Und genau zu diesem Zeitpunkt machte der linke Flügel wieder Probleme. Der letzte Funkspruch. Wir sehen einen Druckabfall im linken Rad. Und dann die letzte Meldung. Roger und dann Schweigen. Minuten später tauchen diese Bilder auf den Fernsehschirmen der Welt auf.
Mit Trauer und Fassungslosigkeit haben Menschen in aller Welt das Unglück der US-Raumfähre Columbia aufgenommen. Zahlreiche Politiker drückten US-Präsident Bush und der israelischen Staatsführung ihr Mitgefühl aus. Groß ist die Bestürzung, vor allem in den USA.
Washington National Mall, die Flaniermeile der Hauptstadt im Zeichen der Katastrophe. Die USA stehen unter Schock und ihr Präsident versucht, die Nation zu trösten. Der Grund, für den sie gestorben sind, lebt weiter. Die Menschheit wird durch die Dunkelheit geführt, über unsere Welt hinaus, durch den Entdeckergeist und die Sehnsucht zu verstehen. Unsere Reise in das All geht weiter.
will go on.
Und vor dem Weißen Haus sagt einer, was viele hier denken. Es ist irgendwie zu viel. Jetzt kommt auch noch das hinzu zu all den Dingen, die heute in der Welt vorgehen. Bislang hat die NASA nicht ermitteln können, was passierte, als Columbia mit 20.000 Kilometern in der Stunde auf die Erde zuraste. Bis zum Eintritt in die Erdatmosphäre hatte es keine Anzeichen gegeben, dass etwas falsch läuft. Dann meldeten Hitzesensoren ein Problem. Columbia fällt auseinander. Mein Versprechen an die Crew und ihre Angehörigen ist, dass unsere Untersuchung die Ursachen findet. Wir bringen das in Ordnung und machen weiter. Und so sind es Trauer und der Blick nach vorn, die eine Nation in schwierigen Zeiten zusammenrücken lässt.
Die NASA hat erklärt, für verbindliche Angaben zur Unglücksursache sei es wirklich noch zu früh. Eberhard Pilz in Washington. Dennoch verdichten sich ja wohl die Hinweise auf diesen Vorfall beim Start.
Nun, davon ist natürlich immerzu die Rede. Die Experten sagen, sie hätten damals festgestellt, dass das eben kein Sicherheitsrisiko sei. Wer sind wir Laien, um das zu beurteilen? Fest steht jedenfalls, dass nicht nur die NASA diese Sache untersuchen wird, sondern die Regierung wird auch eine unabhängige Untersuchungskommission zusätzlich einrichten, die aus Militärexperten und aus Experten der Luftfahrtsicherheitsbehörde bestehen wird. Also es wird von beiden Seiten und auch unabhängig und auch außerhalb der NASA untersucht. Es taucht auch wieder das Argument auf, dass es Kostengründe gewesen sind, die eben dazu geführt haben, dass diese alte Raumfähre weiter benutzt worden ist. All das wird weiter untersucht.
Wird die Columbia-Katastrophe die politischen Pläne von Präsident Bush beeinflussen? Was glauben Sie?
Nein, ich glaube nicht, dass es Einfluss auf die politischen Pläne, also auf die anstehenden Entscheidungen, die der Präsident treffen muss in Sachen Irak, haben wird. Die Stimmung im Land ist natürlich besonders jetzt unter Stress stehen die Menschen. Es gibt also diese Spannung, diese Unsicherheit, was passiert mit dem Krieg, jetzt noch dieses Unglück dazu. Also ich denke, wir werden in den nächsten Tagen und Wochen mehr noch hören von dem Pathos, von dem nationalen und religiösen Pathos, das der Präsident Bush gestern in seiner Ansprache hier zu hören hat lassen.
Dankeschön, Eberhard Pilz nach Washington.
Ist der Absturz des ersten israelischen Astronauten. Das trifft das Land ins Mark. Ilan Ramon war ja auch sowas wie ein Hoffnungsträger in dunklen Zeiten, der auch zeigen sollte, dass es für die Israelis eine Zukunft gibt, eine normale Teilhabe am Leben. Und Israel reagiert mit Trauer und Betroffenheit. Die amerikanischen und israelischen Flaggen sind auf Halbmast. Die Menschen können es immer noch nicht fassen, was da gestern passiert ist. Die Zeitungen schreiben mit viel Pathos und Patriotismus. Ich darf mal eine zitieren. Es entsteht das Gefühl, dass wir heute Hand in Hand, Herz an Herz bei den Vereinigten Staaten sind und auch in den kommenden Wochen und Monaten an ihrer Seite stehen werden. Und eine andere Zeitung zitiert die 5-jährige Tochter Noah des Astronauten, des israelischen Astronauten, mit dem Satz: Wie kann man im Himmel sterben? Menschen sterben doch normalerweise nur auf der Erde.
Warum beteiligt sich Israel an diesem Weltraumprogramm?
Ja, man vergisst angesichts des Nahostkonfliktes immer wieder, dass Israel eine hochentwickelte Wissenschaft und Forschung besitzt. Institute wie zum Beispiel das Weizmann-Institut kann sich mit allen internationalen Einrichtungen messen lassen. Und die Israelis sind an Wissenschaft und Forschung interessiert. Ilan Ramon hat alleine in der Columbia 80 Experimente durchgeführt, davon übrigens einige mit deutscher Beteiligung. Er hat zum Beispiel die Auswirkungen der Schwerelosigkeit auf Bakterien untersucht. Er hat Wetterbeobachtungen gemacht, speziell die Sandstürme, wie die sich auf das Klima, auf das Wetter, auf die globale Erderwärmung auswirken. Und Israels Premierminister Ariel Sharon hat bereits angekündigt, dass dieser Pionier nicht der letzte sein soll. Israel will wieder Astronauten ins Weltall schicken.
Herzlichen Dank für diese Informationen aus Tel Aviv. Ein terroristischer Anschlag auf die Columbia wurde bislang ausgeschlossen. Also gab es vielleicht einen technischen Defekt, der dazu führte, dass die Raumfähre verloren ging. Jetzt bin ich verbunden mit dem Chef des Deutschen Zentrums für Luft- und Raumfahrt, Professor Dr. Sigmar Wittig. Hallo.
Hallo, guten Tag,
Hallo. Was glauben Sie denn, ist gestern am Himmel passiert?
Ja, nun, es wäre jetzt zu früh zu spekulieren. Das kam ja auch in Ihren Berichten immer wieder zur Sprache. Auf der anderen Seite gibt es eine gewisse Plausibilität, dass doch im Hitzeschild etwas nicht ganz gestimmt hat.
War denn die Columbia, die alte Dame mit über 20 Jahren, vielleicht zu alt? Gab es Ermüdungserscheinungen?
Das würde ich so nicht sehen. Sicher, sie ist eben schon recht alt. Andererseits können wir immer wieder feststellen, dass die Columbia, wenn immer sie wieder auf den Boden zurückkam, fast vollständig renoviert, überarbeitet wurde. Das heißt, die Columbia, alle Raumfähren, werden praktisch wieder neuwertig in den Raum, ins All zurückgeschickt. Dennoch kann man das eine oder andere nicht ausschließen. Sie haben vielleicht gehört, im letzten Jahr hat es Risse gegeben in den Brennstoffleitungen, aber auch die wurden behoben.
Aber 20 Jahre sind schon ein ganz schönes Alter, oder?
Ja, aber das ist nicht wie so bei einem alten Auto, sondern ich habe es ja eben angedeutet. Es wird da immer wieder alles durchgecheckt, bis auf die kleinste Komponente.
Okay. Welche Konsequenzen hat denn der Absturz für die Deutschen, die noch ins All wollen, jetzt für Sie?
Ja, für uns hat das natürlich nachhaltige Konsequenzen. Sicherlich wird es zu Zeitverschiebungen kommen. Ich habe in der letzten Woche noch mit den Spitzen der NASA über die nächsten Pläne, die nächsten Missionen gesprochen. Wir wollten im nächsten Jahr, im Oktober, ja Columbus, die europäische Raumstation, ins All andocken an die ISS. Das wird sich sicherlich verschieben. Andererseits müssen wir sehen, dass wir die Experimente weiter vorhalten und eben auch durchführen.
Ich bedanke mich herzlich für das Gespräch.
Gedrängt durch die Weltraumkatastrophe, bei der gestern 7 Astronautinnen und Astronauten ihr Leben verloren. Expeditionen ins erdnahe All schienen zuletzt zur Selbstverständlichkeit zu werden. Sie verliefen routinemäßig wie Busfahrten. Nun also dieses furchtbare Unglück. Es zeigt uns, wie eng die Grenzen der Menschen immer noch gesteckt sind und wie riskant es ist, die Erde zu verlassen. Wir werden über das Ende der Weltraumfähre Columbia sprechen und natürlich auch über den unvermindert drohenden Krieg gegen den Irak. 6 Journalistinnen und Journalisten aus 5 Ländern werden die letzten Ereignisse und Entwicklungen diskutieren. Ich stelle vor, Jewgeni Bowkun, er kommt aus Russland und ist Korrespondent der Zeitung Vremya. Vremya heißt genau, die Zeit wohl im Deutschen, nicht? Caroline Emke aus Deutschland vom Nachrichtenmagazin Der Spiegel. Diana Geddes aus Großbritannien vom Wirtschafts- und auch politischen Magazin The Economist. Frederik Kempe aus den USA vom Wall Street Journal Europa. Henri de Bresson aus Frankreich von der Tageszeitung Le Monde. Frederik Kempe, gibt es seriöse Anhaltspunkte inzwischen schon, warum es zu dieser Katastrophe im Weltraum gekommen ist?
Ja, es ist den Zeiten schon angemessen, dass vom Anfang an hat man sich gefragt, ist das ein Terroranschlag? Aber 60 Kilometer hoch und gibt es überhaupt keine Rakete, die das erreichen konnte. Es ist wahrscheinlich so, dass als diese Rakete überhaupt am 16. Januar in der Luft gegangen ist, gab es schon Schäden. Und ich glaube, dass viele von diesen Heizungsteile, wir sind in der Zeit geschehen.
Das ist dieser Schutzschild, der Hitzeschutzschild war offensichtlich wohl schon beschädigt worden, aber es sind immer noch Spekulationen, ob das die Ursache gewesen sein könnte.
So ist das. Und dieses Raumschiff ist auch der älteste von den 4. Es gibt schon Bedenken gehabt, ob es sicher war vorher. Es gab auch Experten, die sich gefragt haben, ob dieses Shuttle immer noch sicher war. So, ich glaube, man wird sich fragen, ob die Sicherheitsmaßnahmen
ausreichend
waren, ob der Raumschiff zu alt war und ob überhaupt diese Schiffe veraltet sind und nicht mehr benutzt sein sollte.
Ja, da stellt sich ja die grundsätzliche Frage, das wird ja die NASA, also die Weltraumbehörde der USA, stark unter Druck bringen. Es hatte ja schon vor etwa 16 oder 17 Jahren ein schweres Unglück gegeben mit der Weltraumfähre Challenger, die beim Start explodierte. Könnte das die bemannte Raumfahrt jetzt wieder auf den Prüfstand bringen.
Das letzte Mal hat man 2,5 Jahre überhaupt kein Schiff weiter
in den Weltraum
geschickt. Dieses Mal wird das ja schwierig sein, weil es gibt eine internationale Space Station, wo 3 Astronauten sitzen. Und ich glaube, man wird das schon fortsetzen, aber man muss sich wirklich überlegen, ob man die Experten zuhören, die sagen, diese 4 Schiffe sollte man in die Rente schicken. Man sollte neuere, kleinere Schiffe schicken. Das ist alte Technologie und das muss man nicht weitermachen. Es gibt auch eine andere sehr interessante Geschichte. Man muss das auf jeden Fall betonen. Für Israel war das am meisten bedeutend. Das war symbolhaft, dieser israelische Astronaut. Seine Mutter, seine Großmutter haben Auschwitz überlebt. Er hat selber ein Bild hochgegangen, ich glaube Landschaft des Monds, so dass Leute an den Holocaust eigentlich denken, was man alles überlebt hat.
Aber das ist muss man dazu sagen, das ist die Zeichnung eines Jungen aus Auschwitz, der umgekommen ist später und der in Auschwitz ein Bild gemalt hat von einer Mondlandschaft.
Ja, ein 14-Jähriger.
Eine Abbildung dieses Bildes hat er Ilan Ramon mitgenommen.
Ja. Und was auch ganz interessant, das hat mit unserem nächsten Gespräch zu tun, war einer von den Piloten, der in 1981 Irak angegriffen hat und eigentlich dieses Atomprojekt bombardiert hat.
Ah ja. Aber die Frage, ob es weiter eine bemannte Weltraumfahrt geben wird, wird sicher natürlich jetzt auch wieder diskutiert werden. Sie sagten ja, es befinden sich noch einige Astronauten oben in der internationalen Raumstation. Wie werden die denn versorgt? Ist Russland beispielsweise bereit, dort einen Versorgungsflug hinzuschicken? Jewgeni Bovko?
Ja, man hat schon angekündigt, die Russen können den Nachschub übernehmen. Also jedes Volk hat seine nationalen Tragödien. Es ist ja schon sehr traurig, dass solche Ereignisse in Amerika hintereinander kommen. Also ich meine, 11. September erstmal jetzt das. Aber es ist schon gut, dass es eine internationale Zusammenarbeit gibt.
Und die russischen Raumfahrer könnten die jetzt nicht bergen aus der internationalen Raumstation. Das müsste dann die Weltraumfähre übernehmen, die aus den USA abgeschickt würde. Das ist natürlich eine sehr prekäre Situation. Ich kann mir vorstellen, dass die Menschen dort die da hoch über uns kreisen, sich sehr angespannt fühlen. Wie ist das in Frankreich? Frankreich hat auch Astronauten in den Weltraum geschickt. Wie ist das aufgenommen worden, Henri de Bresson?
Ja, Frankreich hat so seit langer Zeit auch so eine große Anstrengung für den Weltraum gemacht und hat versucht, mit den Europäern so ein wenig
konkurrieren.
Ein wenig so ihre Anteile in diesen internationalen Kooperationen zu nehmen. Frankreich hat Astronauten genauso mit amerikanischen Flügen als auch mit sowjetischen Flügen geschickt. Und wir haben sogar momentan eine Ministerin im Kabinett, die eine Astronautin ist. Frankreich hat reagiert wie alle Länder, die wirklich in diesem Weltraumprogramm eine große, die nächste Frontier, Grenze für die Welt sehen. Und ich glaube, wie alle, man ist natürlich sehr beeindruckt von was passiert ist.
Gibt es Ambitionen auf britischer Seite, in den Weltraum vorzustoßen?
Wahrscheinlich überhaupt von Jungs von heute. Das bedeutet als bezahlender Gast. Nein, aber ich weiß nicht. Wir haben nie Astronauten bis jetzt gehabt, glaube ich. Also warum? Ich weiß nicht. Vielleicht, weil wir so eng mit den Amerikanern gebunden sind. Aber darf ich etwas, Sie haben gefragt, ob unsere amerikanischen Kollegen glaubten, dass diese Programme, diese Raumfahrtprogramme fortgesetzt würde. Und wir müssen nicht wahr sagen, dass Präsident Bush hat sogleich gesagt, das müssen wir fortsetzen, ohne Zögerung.
Das wird er fortsetzen, aber der Kongress wird sich fragen, wie? Wenn man die beste Technologien der Welt in Irak vorzeigt und diese veraltete Technologie eigentlich vielleicht schuld ist dass sowas passiert ist, dann wird sich man wirklich fragen, ob man das so weitermacht.
Aber man hat auch gesagt, dass wir haben bis jetzt ungefähr 100 von diesen Raumfahrts gemacht mit Menschen, nicht? Und wir haben bis jetzt 2 Unglücke gehabt. Das ist viel, aber auch nicht so viel. Das ist für eine
2 Unglücke in Amerika. Es hat auch in der Sowjetunion früher auch Unglücke gegeben.
Ich weiß nicht, ob diese Zahlen, das stimmt, ja, Entschuldigung.
Aber der erste Flug dieses Raumschiffes war 1981 und das war der 28. Man denkt, dass diese Raumschiffe sollte 100 Mal fliegen können. Aber warum? Ja. Ich meine, wenn man neue Technologie hat, warum immer noch diese alten Schiffe zu müssen? Ich glaube, die werden nicht weiter benutzt. Vielleicht in der Zwischenzeit, aber was Neues wird gemacht.
Aber ich glaube, es geht doch nicht nur um den Vergleich von sozusagen, wie viele Versuche gibt es und wie viele gelingen oder wie viele technische Schwierigkeiten treten auf oder wie schnell wird sich die Raumfahrt davon wiederholen. Ich glaube, das, was man auch sagen muss, das ist natürlich auch eine ungeheure symbolische Wirkung, die diese Bilder gestern entfaltet haben. Und natürlich gerade in einem Moment, in dem erwogen wird, ob man einen solchen Krieg wie den im Irak beginnen will, gerade in einem Moment, wo man sozusagen versucht, die Welt über den UN-Weltsicherheitsrat nochmal auf eine gemeinsame Weltpolitik einzuschwören, in einem solchen Moment eine solche Katastrophe zu haben, ganz egal, was die Ursachen dafür sind natürlich erstmal auch ein Schock von wirklich großem Ausmaß. Und so waren gestern auch die Reaktionen. Und ich denke auch, die Ursachenforschung, wie auch bei der letzten Katastrophe, wird jetzt hier richtig wichtig sein. Bei der Challenger-Katastrophe war es ja etwas so Banales wie ein Dichtungsring. Der dazu geführt hat. Und die Experten haben darauf hingewiesen, es ist nicht gehört worden. Also wenn sowas hier wieder festzustellen wäre, dass es Informationen oder Warnungen gegeben hätte, die man ignoriert hat, glaube ich, hat das in der Tat eine große Wirkung.
Welche psychologische Wirkung wird das denn in den USA auslösen? Also Jewgeni Bovkun hat es ebenso wie Caroline Emke angesprochen. Es hat so eine Symbolwirkung auch bei dieser...
Es wird eine höhere symbolische Wirkung in Israel haben als in den Staaten, aber trotzdem eine sehr große in den Staaten. Nicht bei dem Challenger waren diese Stars. Das war ganz am Anfang, alle haben alle gekannt, die da mitgeflogen waren. Und diese Leute sind anonym geworden vorher. Und deswegen wird das nicht so eine große Auswirkung haben. Aber ein Zitat wird zurückkommen. Richard Bloomberg, er ist der Vorsitz vom NASA, Vorsitz vom Sicherheitsvorstand. Und er hat gesagt, in all seinen Jahren hat er nie solche große gehabt, bevor ein Abflug, weil er dachte, dass die Sicherheitsvorkehrungen, die Sicherheitsverbesserungen nicht unternommen waren. Infrastruktur war veraltet und das wird zurückkommen. Er hat gewarnt, andere haben gewarnt. Und ich glaube, vom Kongress wird man sich fragen, warum hat man nicht zugehört. Das wird ein großes Skandal geben in den Staaten, aber nicht die psychologische Auswirkung von vorher, eher ein politischer Skandal, wie es passiert ist.
Ja. Schönen Dank. Also ich denke, wir werden noch in den nächsten Tagen sehr viele Informationen darüber erfahren. Es wird ja auch sehr schwer sein, die Unglücksursachen genau so schnell festzustellen. Die Teile der Weltraumfähre sind ja weit verstreut in Texas auf die Erde eingeschlagen und ich denke, das wird Monate dauern, bis man die wahre Ursache herausfindet. Ich war ein bisschen überrascht, weil man gleich so mit Vermutungen kam, dass es an der Fluglage gelegen hätte oder an anderen Dingen. Also am Ende kommt dann vielleicht auch so etwas heraus wie ein ganz banaler Dichtungsring, mit dem man am Anfang bei der Katastrophe Challenger auch nicht gerechnet hatte.
Investigators search for debris and for the reasons behind the space shuttle tragedy. And in the United States and many other parts of the world, mourners paid tribute to the men and women aboard the ill-fated spaceship. Hello and welcome to World News. I'm Dumi Makabo. In one devastating incident this weekend, 2 countries suffered tragic losses and the United States space program was dealt a major setback. Space Shuttle Columbia had just returned to Earth's orbit on Saturday on its way to land in Florida when it broke apart 65 kilometers above the southern United States. The 7 astronauts on board were killed and pieces of the shuttle covered an area nearly 400 kilometers long. NASA officials and recovery crews across the southern United States are enlisting those living in the debris field to help locate the pieces. But as Ed Lavandera reports from East Texas, people are finding that more than just metal fell from the sky.
It's got 15 or 20 pieces of the tile and the metal.
The phone lines in the Anderson County Sheriff's Office were jammed.
I couldn't find this one on 2120.
Again, it's 69 North. Ask them what it is and the size of it.
With reports of space shuttle debris falling all over East Texas.
I'll go out and confirm all that.
One of the calls came from Pat Ivy. He found a chunk of metal spinning on a quiet road. Ivy stood guard over the shuttle debris.
Within 2 miles, I started seeing debris laying on the highway, and it was kind of a deep feeling come to my stomach that, this looks like a piece of aircraft, and sure enough, it was the shuttle.
The debris field covers hundreds of square miles in East Texas and into western Louisiana. Under the bright blue Texas sky, large chunks, like this door, sit in wooded areas. And what appears to be a burned backpack fell near a farmhouse.
This possibly could have belonged to someone, a crew member on this craft.
But when residents found an astronaut's helmet and a crew member's mission patch, the nightmare of what had happened became clear. Then 2 young boys discovered a leg. They rushed to tell their parents.
It was a leg. You could see from where the leg begins, not the waist, just the leg, and you could see down to its foot. No clothing, it was burnt.
When the Space Shuttle Columbia exploded, many residents described hearing a thunderous roar that lasted several minutes. Then they started hearing the debris falling to the ground. These will be the distinct memories forever ingrained in the minds of many people across East Texas. Ed Lavandera, CNN, Nacogdoches.
NASA authorities say one of the first directions in their investigation will center on an event that happened during Columbia's launch. Shortly after liftoff in January, a piece of insulating foam broke loose from the spacecraft and struck one of the orbiter's wings. NASA officials reviewed the incident and decided it wasn't dangerous to the mission. They'll look closely at whether the broken foam is connected to the accident. NASA officials say foam also broke off in earlier launches, but never before struck the shuttle itself. Well, despite NASA's suspension of further shuttle flights, officials say the International Space Station program is not in danger. They say the 3 astronauts aboard are not stranded because, if necessary, they can come back on the Russian Soyuz rocket. NASA's shuttle program director also said the station's astronauts have enough supplies to last until late June. Meanwhile, officials say a Russian Progress flight to the space station planned for Sunday will proceed, but say there are no other quick alternatives to replace the shuttle. Columbia's crew represented some of the best and brightest in the NASA family. Rick Husband was on his 2nd trip into space. His first was a 1999 mission ferrying supplies to the International Space Station. An Air Force colonel and mechanical engineer, he joined the astronaut program in 1994. Payload Commander Michael Anderson was making his 2nd foray into space as well. An Air Force colonel, he was also a physicist and in charge of Columbia's scientific experiments. An African-American, he had praised the opportunities he saw for others of his race in the space program. Mission specialist David Brown was on his first space mission. A Navy aviator, he was also a trained and experienced flight surgeon. He joined NASA in 1996. Indian-born Kalpana Chawla had a doctorate in aerospace engineering. She had flown on a prior shuttle mission and had experience operating the shuttle's robotic arm in space. Laurel Clark was on her first shuttle voyage, a naval commander and medical officer. She was taking part in a series of biological experiments. U.S. Naval Commander William McCool was piloting the Columbia. It was his first shuttle voyage. McCool was an experienced military pilot with more than 2,800 demanding hours in the air. Finally, Air Force Colonel Ilan Ramon was the first Israeli in space. A former fighter pilot, he was a veteran of Israel's Yom Kippur War. He also saw combat in Lebanon in 1982. Family members had flown to Florida to await his landing at the Kennedy Space Center. Leaders around the world are offering their condolences to the United States for the loss. British Prime Minister Tony Blair wrote to both President Bush and Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon to express his government's sadness. French President Jacques Chirac expressed, quote, profound emotion and feelings of solidarity, unquote. And Japanese Prime Minister Junichiro Koizumi says he is praying for all the crew members. A Japanese astronaut was scheduled to fly on NASA's next shuttle mission, but U.S. officials have suspended all shuttle flights during the investigation of the Columbia accident. Many people wanting to show support for those who died and their families are turning Houston's Johnson Space Center into a memorial. Jeff Flock has more.
You are looking at the scene at the main gate outside the Johnson Space Center. The question is, at a time like this, where does everyone come? Well, maybe you see, this is in fact where everyone has come, and it's almost amazing how quickly this has all grown up. The balloons, the flowers, freshly written poems and messages. I see an Israeli flag and a tribute to the Israeli astronaut, and all sorts of other written messages sent along. Off to the side here is a fence, and that on beyond leads into the Johnson Space Center, and on that fence you see other messages that have been posted. God bless the NASA families. Our prayers are with you, says one. You will not be forgotten, Columbia, another. To the people of Israel, India, America, nations that all had people aboard the shuttle, messages to them as well. This is in fact where the people of Houston are coming to pay their tributes. No other place for it this evening. And we talked to a family who told us that when they heard the news this morning, the first thing they did was bring their children to the television to watch history unfold.
I vividly remember the Challenger. It happened on my 15th birthday, and I've never forgotten it. And hearing something like this again, I mean, this is kind of one of those events where you're always going to remember where you were at when you heard the news. And this is history, a tragic history in the making, and I think this is something that my children needed to know and to see and witness firsthand.
They have been coming all day, and so they continue to come into the night. The pictures at night perhaps even more poignant with the flickering of the candles. One person saying, I didn't know where else to go. Another person saying that at a time like this, I feel so helpless. I don't know what to do. For now, this may be all. I'm Jeff Flock, CNN, at the Johnson Space Center.
The Space Shuttle Columbia's last flight was a research mission. The crew completed more than 80 experiments during their 16 days in orbit. Their flight was the 28th for the Columbia, which had been in service 22 years and was NASA's oldest shuttle. Those who knew them say the 7 astronauts aboard the ill-fated spaceship believed their duties were a calling, not a job. Participating in a space shuttle mission was something they had long wanted to do.
This is a passion for us. Human spaceflight is a passion. It's an emotional event. And when we work together as family members. And we treat each other much that way. And whether it's the loss of a crew member or a loss of a member of our ground team or processing teams, it's a sad loss for us. And so we are a very close community. We understand the risks that are involved in human spaceflight. And we know that these risks are manageable, but we also know that they're serious and can have deadly consequences.
The shuttle commander was a U.S. Air Force colonel and father of 2 from Amarillo, Texas. Rick Husband was selected to be an astronaut in 1994 on his 4th try. He made up his mind as a child that being an astronaut was what he would do with his life.
From the time I was about 4 years old, I wanted to be an astronaut. And it was about that time when the Mercury program started up. And so I saw those things on the TV, and it just really excited me. It really grabbed my interest in seeing those rockets and learning about the astronauts and seeing what they were doing. And then the models that came out in the stores when you could build the plastic models. And I remember building a Gemini model that I put together, and just I thought everything about that was so fascinating. And then following that all the way through from Mercury to Gemini to Apollo, watching the moon landings and everything, it was just so incredibly adventurous and exciting to me that I just thought there's no doubt in my mind that that's what I want to do when I grow up.
Ilan Ramon's place aboard Columbia had special meaning for Israel, a nation bruised by terror attacks and sometimes fractious politics. Abihar Even of Israel's space agency joins us with more about the man who told family members that space was so beautiful he wished he could stay. Mr. Har Even, thank you very much for joining us. Now, we keep hearing time and time again that for many of these people who participate in these space programs, going to space is a long-held dream. No doubt it was the same thing for Ilan Ramon.
Ilan Ramon was a very good pilot, a fighter, and you know, a few years ago no one thought that someone from Israel will be an astronaut. When it was decided to have Israeli scientific payload, and then after we decided about it, we decided that we need an astronaut to operate this payload. The Air Force decided, because I appealed to them, they have a very good apparatus for choosing people, and they've recommended Ilan Ramon. I met him. I was very impressed from the first moment. I don't think that in his childhood he thought he would be an astronaut, but as a pilot we probably thought about it, although maybe as a very, very far dream. And when he was chosen to do this, and I met him, he was full with enthusiasm. You know, he even didn't believe that it's real. And with his enthusiasm, and we start choosing the experiment, which should be a scientific one. We met a lot of people, a lot of experiments, and Ilan helped me very much in judging and choosing this experiment. He also, after he went to Houston for training, during those 4 years with more and more postponements, he was very, you know, cool, and he was calming us. Don't worry, it's okay. Although personally, maybe it was not so convenient for him. He was very modest. He was very cooperative in everything. He is also a spirit of a patriot. Although he was not religious, but when he looked at now from space to the earth to Israel, you could hear from his expression and also from the emails he sent to me that, you know, he's very, very impressed, and he sees not just the grand and the land, but he also thinks about our prophets and about the historical place of Israel in the Jewish history.
Now, we all understand that choosing or trying to select people who will participate in these programs is indeed a very difficult process. What was it about him that made him different from all the other people who could potentially have also gone up in Space Shuttle Columbia?
Well, when we start speaking about this experiment, I received a lot of letters from very, very good people. And at the beginning I said, look, we still have to wait. Then when our Air Force, General Ben Eliyahu, entered in the picture, he started talking about it. I knew that our Air Force had the tools to choose and to select the best one. And I'm sure it was not so simple for them because, as I said before, many people were also suitable for this mission. But at least they chose the Ilan, and as I said before, it was a very good decision.
Abihar Even of Israel's space agency, thank you very much once again for joining us. To the developments of Saturday and the breakup of Space Shuttle Columbia, the disaster that occurred just 4 days after the anniversary of the doomed 1988 liftoff of the Space Shuttle Challenger. Our Bangkok Bureau Chief Tom Mintier covered it for us 17 years ago, and he joins us now to tell us what happened then. Tom, thank you very much for being with us. What are your memories?
Well, to me, it's very difficult to see the pictures that we saw yesterday as Columbia was making its descent. And you could see the images of what looked like the orbiter breaking up. This was just 16 minutes before its scheduled landing at the Kennedy Space Center. 17 years ago, it was about 70 seconds into the flight, in the takeoff portion of it, when Challenger was blown apart, and you could see the debris raining down. So extremely difficult to watch. A bit different type of image, but when Challenger came apart, you could see the pieces raining back to Earth, and it was very difficult to watch what was happening and going on yesterday as Columbia was streaking across the sky, and you could see the secondary explosions with Columbia. With Challenger, it was those streams of white that you just never seem to be able to forget.
Now, Tom, tell us a little bit about the sense, what people were feeling after Challenger. What we're getting now is that even though we have seen this tragedy, people seem very determined and steadfast to continue with the space program. That wasn't necessarily the case 17 years ago, was it?
No, 17 years ago there was a very serious consideration to probably stopping the program, because people were saying, you know, at what price exploration of space. But I think after this accident, there is a realization of those who are involved in the space program, especially those who fly on this vehicle, that it's an extremely dangerous thing to do. And the two most dangerous portions of any flight is takeoff and landing. When you're landing, the pressures that the vehicle apparently take, from talking to people who've been on it, are just tremendous, and the amount of heat that builds up. You know, you have to remember this accident occurred at 200,000 feet in the air, traveling at about 12,000 miles an hour, and these are just unbelievable numbers.
All right, Tom, thank you very much.
Beim Start entstandene Schäden an der Raumfähre hätten bei einem Raumspaziergang untersucht werden müssen, sagte der deutsche Astronaut und Wissenschaftler Ulrich Walter, der im Rahmen der D2-Mission selbst im All gewesen ist, in einem Interview mit NTV. Nach einem Bericht der britischen Zeitung Observer habe die NASA wiederholt Experten Warnungen über die Sicherheit des amerikanischen Raumfahrtprogramms erhalten. Der Leiter des Raumfährenprogramms Ron Ditmore entgegnete, dass eine Reparatur des Hitzeschildes im All selbst sowieso nicht möglich gewesen wäre. Die Columbia war gestern Nachmittag in 63 Kilometer Höhe über dem Bundesstaat Texas abgestürzt. Die 7 Astronauten an Bord kamen ums Leben.
Eine Wiese irgendwo in Texas. Ein Abzeichen, das die Astronautenanzüge der Crew zierte. Ich dachte zuerst, es sei ein Stück Müll. Aber als ich näher hinsah, erkannte ich einen Flicken, einen Flight Mission Aufnäher mit dem Namen aller Crewmitglieder, das Abzeichen der Mission. In diesem Moment musste ich die Tränen zurückhalten. An einem anderen Ort in Texas. Neben Trümmern sind auch menschliche Überreste entdeckt worden. Ein Leichenwagen transportiert sie ins örtliche Krankenhaus. Die Experten der NASA auf Ursachensuche. Jedes noch so kleine Teil eine Spur, eine mühsame Notwendigkeit, um Katastrophen wie diese zu verhindern. Rußgeschwärzte Trümmerteile, alles, was von der Raumfähre Columbia noch übrig ist. Weiträumig über mehrere 100 Kilometer verteilt sind die Reste des Shuttles auf die Erde geprallt. Rückblende. Es ist 9 Uhr Ortszeit. Die Columbia befindet sich im Landeanflug mit 6-facher Schallgeschwindigkeit. In wenigen Minuten soll der Shuttle auf dem Weltraumbahnhof Cape Canaveral aufsetzen. An Bord 5 Männer und 2 Frauen. Dann die ersten Komplikationen. Die Sensoren für die Temperaturmessung fallen aus. Die Katastrophe nimmt ihren Lauf. Tatenlos müssen Angehörige und Kollegen am Boden zusehen, wie die Astronauten ums Leben kommen. Augenzeugen berichten von einem lauten Knall und viel Rauch. Die Columbia bricht auseinander. Die Besatzung hatte keine Chance.
Was dort passiert, passiert in Sekunden praktisch. Und bei Beschleunigung vom 3- bis 4-fachen der Erdbeschleunigung, die Leute können also im Fahrzeug nichts machen und sie können auch nicht nach draußen reden, weil der Plasmaschirm, der um das Gerät zu dieser Zeit ist, keine Funksignale oder Sprechsignale durchlässt.
16 Tage lang war die Besatzung im All. Rund um die Uhr haben die Männer und Frauen gearbeitet. Mehr als 80 Experimente haben sie durchgeführt. Das ist ein tragischer Tag für die gesamte NASA, für die Familien der Astronauten und für die ganze Nation. Sie haben ihr Leben geopfert, um die Forschung voranzutreiben, für uns alle. Sie haben sich für dieses Ziel engagiert und sie haben das mit einem glücklichen Herzen und großen Enthusiasmus getan. Im ganzen Land wehen die Flaggen auf Halbmast. US-Präsident Bush spricht den Angehörigen sein Beileid aus. Für ihre Courage, ihren Mut und ihren Idealismus, dafür werden wir sie alle vermissen. Alle Amerikaner sind in Gedanken bei den Familien dieser Männer und Frauen, die diesen Schock und diese Trauer aushalten müssen. Ein Defekt am Hitzeschild könnte die Ursache für die Katastrophe sein. Dieses sollte eigentlich die Columbia beim Wiedereintritt in die Erdatmosphäre vor der Hitzeentwicklung schützen. Eine der letzten Pressekonferenzen der Astronauten, schon damals war klar, beim Start der Raumfähre hatte sich ein Stück Isolation gelöst und war gegen die linke Tragfläche des Shuttles geprallt. Absolut kein Anlass zur Sorge, hatte die NASA dazu erklärt.
Bundeskanzler Schröder hat dem US-Präsidenten, den Hinterbliebenen und dem amerikanischen Volk sein Beileid ausgesprochen. Schröder äußerte sich in Hannover bei seiner Stimmabgabe für die Landtagswahl in Niedersachsen.
Es ist jedem verständlich, dass mich das genauso betroffen gemacht hat, wie jedem, der unter Umständen noch am Fernsehen alles hat verfolgen können. Ich habe dem amerikanischen Präsidenten, ich habe dem israelischen Premierminister mein Beileid ausgedrückt und gebeten, das auch den Angehörigen zu übermitteln. Ich denke, dass man wirklich sagen kann und muss, dass viele Menschen in Deutschland mit den Opfern, mit ihren Angehörigen trauern. Und das geht sicher uns allen auch so.
Now, David, as they go about trying to gather all the debris that was left behind from the breakup, is there any indication of what the procedure will be after that, where they're going to take it to, and perhaps how long it may take to try to figure out what happened?
At this point, no one is even beginning to guess how long it's going to take because some of the pieces here are so widespread and so small, it could be weeks, maybe even months before members of the public are able to find anything. And of course, every small piece matters right now because you never know exactly what piece is going to be able to tell investigators what happened to the shuttle.
All right, David, thank you very much for the update. The U.S. government is working closely with NASA to investigate the cause of Columbia's disintegration. Patty Davis reports.
The debris strewn across several states is crucial to finding what caused the accident.
We're going to gather every piece we can find, treat this much like an aircraft incident, and see if we can solve the puzzle.
Finding the pieces is a massive undertaking, but an essential one. If the cause is structural, debris could provide the key clues.
They can then piece that together to figure out how it came apart, and then that'll help them figure out where the cause was.
That's why officials are appealing to the public to turn over any pictures people took of the shuttle falling and to turn in any pieces found.
If you find debris, please call local authorities immediately to tell them of the location.
The Federal Emergency Management Agency is coordinating the federal government's response and recovery. The military guarding and searching for debris using planes, boats, and helicopters. The FAA instituting a 40-mile wide, 160-mile long restricted zone below 3,000 feet from Texas to Louisiana to protect aircraft involved in the recovery. The National Transportation Safety Board sending vehicle structure and system experts to help. NTSB crash investigators helped piece together debris from the in-flight breakup of the TWA 800 crash. This debris field as much as 100 times bigger.
This is going to be an extraordinarily challenging investigation. The vehicle was at 200,000 feet. It was traveling at 12,500 miles per hour. There simply has never been a breakup like like this in aviation or space history.
In addition to debris, NASA says the shuttle had data and voice recorders, but more importantly, it was constantly streaming information to mission control.
We are preserving hardware around the country in our different facilities. We are impounding data here that represented the last data that we received from the crew. And we will be poring over that data 24 hours a day.
Besides NASA's own investigation, an independent group, including the military and the FAA, will look into what happened. An investigation that could take months, if not years. Patty Davis, CNN, Washington.
To those who perished aboard Space Shuttle Columbia, many braved the cold to place flowers and offer their condolences at the U.S. Embassy. The Russian Foreign Ministry said Sunday that Igor Ivanov called U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell and Israeli Foreign Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to express his sympathies. Russian President Vladimir Putin had also telephoned U.S. President George W. Bush and sent a telegram to Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon. Well, despite the Columbia disaster, Russia decided to go ahead with its planned launch of an unmanned cargo ship on a flight to the International Space Station. Liftoff took place just a short while ago. Our Relitsa Vasilova joins us now from Moscow with details. Relitsa.
To me, the Progress M47 cargo vessel, as you mentioned, is successfully launched just a few minutes ago. It's right about now reaching its orbit. It is carrying supplies to the International Space Station, food, fuel, even letters, and other supplies to the three-man crew, one of whom is a Russian. It is expected to reach the International Space Station on Tuesday. In the meantime, Russian space officials and members of the Russian Space Agency are in a state of shock and grief for the loss of their colleagues. They were quick to offer their condolences and also their assistance, whatever Russia can do with its space program to fill in the gaps that will be left, the big gaps that will be left now that NASA has decided to postpone any launches until it finds out what caused the tragedy of Columbia. What we have is an offer of assistance. Russia, what it can do is it has 2 manned space flights scheduled till the end of the year of Soyuz rockets. It also has 3 cargo ships scheduled, but beyond that, it doesn't have any more rockets or cargo ships built. Unlike the shuttle, the Soyuz rockets are not reusable. Once they're built, once they're used, they cannot be used again, so new ones have to be built. So Russia is asking for help if more will be needed. It needs more help with funding to be able to build more of those because beyond next year, it does not have the capacity of any more rockets and ships. It is also considering, according to Sergei Grabunov, who's the space agency spokesman, considering making adjustments to what it has now in terms of flights and capacities. For example, they're thinking of their planned space launch, manned space launch of a Soyuz rocket in April. They're considering the possibility of sending it up unmanned so that they would not deplete resources and food for the 3-man crew that is up on the International Space Station. They're seriously concerned beyond this year for the long-term health and fate of the International Space Station. They are concerned about resupplying it. They think for the next year that it will be able to function, but beyond that, they have serious concerns. They want to get together with all the 16 countries that are participating in the International Space Station program to figure out how to keep the space station resupplied. Russia has very limited capabilities of filling in what the shuttle was able to supply. For example, just to give you an idea, shuttles are capable of carrying 30 tons of supplies, while the Progress vessel like the one that launched just moments ago is capable of carrying only up to 2 tons of supplies. The shuttles are able to carry big essential components which Progress cannot hold. Also, the International Space Station itself needs to be boosted now and again. It lowers its altitude constantly, needs to be boosted now and again, and that was what the shuttle was doing, to boost it up so that it doesn't fall back into the atmosphere. The Progress vehicle has just 1 engine to the shuttle's 4 engines. It could possibly do this with some extra fuel, extra funding. There are some contingency plans, but it's not clear. All this needs to be discussed. And that is the latest from Moscow. Moscow space officials, Russian space officials willing to help with whatever they can, but they cannot match the capabilities of what the shuttle could do. Back to you, Tumi.
Centre de contrôle de Houston, la navette Columbia se prépare pour son entrée dans l'atmosphère. L'équipage qu'on voit ici en entraînement détecte alors des anomalies. Des capteurs indiquent une hausse de la température. La navette est à 2250 km de la Floride et file à plus de 21 000 km/h. 8h58, les signaux passent au rouge. Au sol, le Capcom rentre en contact avec le commandant de bord. Voici la dernière communication enregistrée.
And Columbia, Houston, we see your tire pressure messages and we did not copy your last.
Roger,
Les ingénieurs comprennent alors que le contact vient d'être perdu. Ils n'entendront ensuite que ces crépitements lancés par la radio. Au même moment, à 63 km d'altitude et à près de 500 km/h, Columbia se transforme en boule de feu. Les techniciens de la NASA avancent les premières explications.
Les premières indications ont été la perte des capteurs, les jauges de température du système hydraulique sur l'aile gauche. À la fois, les 11 capteurs de température interne et externe. Cela a ensuite été suivi par plusieurs autres incidents, et notamment la perte d'indication de pression des pneus sur la partie gauche de l'appareil. Ensuite, on a eu des indications d'une chaleur excessive sur la structure.
Ce vol était la 107e mission scientifique de la navette. Un vol placé sous haute protection, car à bord avait pris place le premier Israélien envoyé dans l'espace. Les Américains craignaient des attentats. L'heure du décollage n'avait même été communiquée que 24 heures auparavant. Un décollage qui ne s'était pas passé totalement comme prévu. Un morceau de la navette s'est décroché lors de la mise à feu, un débris de mousse compact qui a endommagé l'aile gauche de Columbia, un incident qui pourrait être à l'origine de l'accident, mais considéré à l'époque sans gravité par la NASA.
Et quelques minutes après l'explosion, des centaines de débris hautement toxiques se sont écrasés sur le sol du Texas, un État grand comme la France. Des restes humains de l'équipage ont également été recueillis.
C'est une véritable pluie de débris qui s'est abattue sur l'État du Texas. Quelques minutes après la désintégration de la navette Columbia, les premières pièces métalliques s'éparpillaient sur plus de 280 km².
Une pièce est tombée 15 mètres devant mon camion. J'ai immédiatement pensé qu'il se passait quelque chose de terrible.
Des pièces incandescentes sont tombées au gré du hasard et du vent, sans faire de victimes. Complètement déformés, ces morceaux de métal n'ont pas résisté à l'extrême chaleur. D'autres, au contraire, sont intacts, comme ce casque ou encore cet écusson retrouvé par hasard.
Je cherchais des pièces de la navette. Je marchais quand j'ai aperçu des débris. Je me suis rapproché et j'ai vu un écusson. C'était le blason de l'équipe avec les noms des membres d'équipage. C'était très émouvant. J'étais au bord de larmes.
Des restes de corps humains ont même été retrouvés. Rapidement dépêchés sur les lieux, les autorités ont dressé un périmètre de sécurité à l'abri des regards. Au même instant, comble de la morbidité sur l'Internet, des particuliers proposaient aux enchères des débris supposés de la navette avant d'être finalement retirés. La NASA rappelant à cette occasion à la population de ne pas toucher les restes de la navette en raison de leur toxicité. Pour l'heure, les recherches continuent. Les enquêteurs cherchent la moindre trace de Columbia. 70 points d'impact ont déjà été recensés.
Throughout the day, there will be a number of memorial services, both here at Cape Canaveral and also across the country. Flags are still flying at half-mast, like the one you can see behind me, and now also floral tributes and messages of support for the families and also for NASA from local people, and also people across this country are starting to arrive at NASA centres like the Kennedy Space Center here.
There are going to be 3 separate inquiries run simultaneously into what happened. Implicit in that, is there any criticism of NASA itself that they can't run the only inquiry?
Not really. These these investigations are at their initial stages, really, and the main focus of these investigations for the time being is that damage to the left wing. We know that when Columbia blasted off 16 days ago from here, some debris fell off the space shuttle and hit that left wing. Now, at the time, mission controllers didn't think that was a big problem, but during re-entry, they started to have problems with that left wing. They lost some heat sensors to it, and then the rest of the space shuttle began to overheat. Now, the crew on board and also mission control were working on that problem. They were aware that it was a bit of a problem. They were working on it when Columbia disintegrated. Now, so for everybody concerned, that is the main focus of their investigation. What happened to that left wing?
How will America formally be remembering these astronauts? What's planned?
Well, there is a national memorial service planned at some later date, although the date and time of that hasn't been announced. The president already spoke on their behalf and praised them for being very brave people. There are very small community memorial services taking place today, not only here at the Kennedy Space Center, which is the spiritual home, really, of the space movement, but also across the country. Small memorial service to remember the dead.
Fergal Parkinson there. The Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon has vowed that his country will send more astronauts into space despite the shuttle disaster. Mr. Sharon was speaking in Jerusalem in remembrance of Ilan Ramon, the first Israeli in space who died with the other 6 astronauts on board Columbia. Russia's space program continues despite the Columbia disaster. An unmanned rocket blasted off from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. It will deliver supplies to the International Space Station. Its 3 crew members, 2 Americans and a Russian, will now have to rely on these rockets for the remainder of their mission. And that's all from the BBC World Newsroom for the moment.
When Air Force Colonel Ilan Ramon headed for Columbia's blast-off, he was a rare symbol of hope and pride for Israelis, battered and buffeted by more than 2 years of deadly conflict. Now, in the tails of smoke over Texas, those hopes have vanished.
We had a little bit of a moment of pride, a moment of light, and it seems to be taken away from us. It's awful.
Remnants of a dream, this banner headline. Weeping for Ilan, the message here, as students, from the very youngest, talked about the tragedy, seeking, like all Israelis, to come to grips with the pain that has replaced the innocent hope.
Because he was a representative of the country in this issue, it was more hurting than anyone that was killed in a car bomb or something like that.
From space, Ilan Ramon spoke of the vulnerability of the planet, of the smallness of his own country, feelings resonating all the more with his fellow Israelis now.
We thought that this hope will bring us a little bit smile to the face, because this period is very difficult for us in Israel. We hope that this project will continue with other Israeli astronauts.
Ariel Sharon sent condolences to the people of the United States. The Prime Minister called Ramon a bold pilot who did not, he said, deserve to be taken from us, along with our hopes and dreams. But with US Ambassador Dan Kurtz at his side, Sharon insisted the tragedy should not mean the end of the brave endeavor.
Their deaths are not in vain. Man's journey into space will continue. Cooperation between the United States and Israel in this field will continue. The day will come when we will launch more Israeli astronauts into space.
Flags are at half-staff as Israel mourns, together with its best friend, the United States. For a while, Ilan Ramon's space journey diverted some of Israel's attention from their searing conflict with the Palestinians, from their domestic political turmoil. Now, in a troubled region, even as they mourn, those issues return to be confronted with greater intensity. Gerald Kessel, CNN, Jerusalem.
Welcome back. While the world mourns the loss of the Space Shuttle Columbia and its crew, in India, millions are grieving for one astronaut in particular, Kalpana Chawla, who made history by becoming the first person born in India to enter space. Dr. Manju Gupta joins us now from New Delhi. Dr. Gupta is one of Chawla's former classmates. Thank you very much for joining us. No doubt a very difficult time for everyone. How are people in India coping with this tragic loss?
You actually can't cope with such a loss. I think maybe over time, such things, you get used to the idea of someone so great just going from between you. But right now, it's just shock and numbness and nothing much more. It was so unexpected. I mean, when a mission goes all right for 16 days, you don't feel that something's going to happen in the last 16 minutes of a mission. So,
as you mentioned, indeed a very difficult time for everyone and very unexpected, as you say, especially so close to the point when they were scheduled to land. But let's go back a little bit. You knew her as a classmate. What was she like?
She was very fun-loving and she was an introvert, basically. But she was unconventional. And we could say that she was like a tomboy. She liked to dress up like boys, and she liked to do those things which are a little unconventional. Like, for example, taking aeronautical engineering in 1970s was a little unconventional for a girl from a small place like Karnal. But that was how she was.
So what was it then that that made her want to do that, to take aeronautical engineering? And did that in fact mean that she thought it would be possible one day for her to go into space?
She was always fascinated by the sky and aeroplanes. Maybe at that time when she was in school she didn't think about space, but yes, she was always fascinated about aeroplanes and flying and things like that. And then the best part was that she dreamed big and she could achieve them. That is what makes her stand apart.
Looking at that and perhaps the legacy and how loved she was in India, is there a sense that there are more people who are now more determined to perhaps follow in her footsteps? All right, Dr. Gupta, can you still hear me? All right, it seems that we've lost our line to Dr. Gupta, but nevertheless, thank you very much to her for joining us. Be sure to stay tuned to CNN for continuing coverage of the Space Shuttle Columbia tragedy. You can also, just a reminder, log on to our website if you'd like to go online to get the very latest information. Our online coverage will include audio, video, as well as photo galleries, and there'll also be timelines, some interactive animations, and a lot more. That's all at CNN.com.